November 19th meeting of the Concord City Planning Board. Before we call the roll, we'll recognize the seat Frank Kennison is an alternate in tonight. And Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Chairman Woodfin?
Here.
Vice Chair Fox? Here. Councilor Champlin?
Here.
Member Smithmeyer? Member Fox?
Here.
Member Hicks?
Here.
Member Rosenberger? Here. Member Kennison?
Yes.
Okay, item 3 on the agenda is approval of August minutes as submitted. Anybody like to make a change or a motion to approve those minutes as submitted?
Move approval.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. A quick meeting overview. A couple items have been removed from our agenda tonight, so if anybody is here for item 8E, 8F, and 8G that have been postponed until the October meeting, that is 8E is a smokestack project. 8F is a project, Chorlean project with a lot line adjustment, and 8G is a major site plan at the Chorlean site as well. So if anybody's here for those have been postponed until the October meeting. So that's to item 5, determination of completeness component for our first item. Could we read items 5A, 5B, and 5C into the record?
5A, TF Bernier Incorporated on behalf of Harold E. and Judith Ekstrom requesting major site plan approval to construct a new 4-story building for 3 apartments and associated site improvements at 5064 Warren Street, 3236 North Street, 18 and 19 and 21 Green Streets in the Civic Preference and Downtown Residential Districts.
No, spring, just for the record. Sorry.
Item 5B is John Dudek on behalf of Granite State Baptist Church of Concord requesting site plan approval for the construction of a 8,242 square foot 56 parking lot and associated landscaping, grading, and drain improvements in the industrial district. And item 5C, Nobis Engineering on behalf of 125 North State Street, SC, requesting major site plan approval for the construction of 3-story office addition, a 1-story conference room, parking lot improvements at 125 North State Street, neighborhood residential district. Staff does recommend all of those applications be determined complete in the public hearing set for the October planning board meeting.
Okay, and just for the record, the determination of completeness components, no public testimonies acted on these applications. We'll have the public hearings next for all those items. Would somebody like to make a motion to, as outlined so eloquently by the clerk, that those applications have been found complete, and we'll set the public for next month?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to item 6 on the agenda, design review applications by consent. If anybody's here for any items on this consent agenda, which is items A, 6B, 6C through 6G, if anybody'd like to speak against those applications as they've been submitted, please make yourself known. If not, the board will recommend or vote on those by consent as a whole. Anybody in the audience wish to address any of those items? Any member of the board wish to pull any of those items from review? No, so we'll address all items in totality. Again, items 6A through 6G. Somebody make the motion to grant those review applications by consent.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Bring to a public hearing session. We got a little housekeeping item. Last month, we had a sign application came through for Caldwell Banker. If we could read that into the record, we need to vote on that. We denied that application last month because the sign was already up and it wasn't as ADR had approved it. So we'd like to bring it back to the table. It has been fixed and the sign is as it was submitted by ADR. So we just need to vote on that for the record.
That's Caldwell Burt Lifestyles on behalf of John Pappas Revocable Trust, requesting ADR approval to replace an existing wall sign at 80 North Main Street in the Central Business Performance District. We do have a graphic showing what the sign looks like if anyone wants to see it.
It's in here last month, so I could just kind of...
Sure. This is what was did to ADR, and that is what the sign...
Yeah, and it wasn't approved because there was some writing across them, and the fact that it was already up, even though we were putting on it that night. So it was denied, so now we'll have to have it as submitted by ADR. So someone like to make a motion to approve that as submitted and with those recommendations? Yes.
Did we find them?
That I don't.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Don't ask me what and how much, but yes, the answer was, it was yes. So would you like to make a motion to approve that sign as submitted and with those 8 recommendations?
So moved. Second.
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That brings us to item 7A. Let's read that into the record.
7A is the Hotel Concord requesting ADR approval to build a new internally illuminated wall sign at 11 South Street in the Central Business Performance District.
Is the applicant here?
Do you want me to give ADR's recommendation?
I can't believe the applicant's not here. Please.
ADR had recommended that the applicant would return with a smaller sign and also return with an image showing what it would look like at night, because they do have, we did approve during design review lighting of the lightness of the building. So they wanted to see, and the sign is an internally illuminated sign, so they wanted to see what the internally illuminated sign and that cornice lighting around the top of the building would look like at night. And they also wanted the sign to be reduced so that it wasn't crowding the windows, so that it wasn't so large.
So there was some variances given for this because it was put on a middle floor, put close to the windows. These are 54-inch tall letters on the side of the building, and the ADR notes will recognize that the applicant wants the sign to be seen from the highway. And while I can appreciate that, I'm troubled by the size, and I'm troubled that it's stuck right in the middle of the building. So I wanted to hear from the applicant. The applicant's not here, so I don't know what the course of action
I
is.
think you had some comments from the board members.
We had some comments from the board
They were
members?
raising their hands.
The question about the size,
Oh, yes.
reducing the height of the letters or reducing the sort of the length of the sign itself,
I think it was reducing the height.
the height. Okay, and
They were looking
moving it.
for a 20, I think I recommended a 50% reduction in the size would bring it down to 20-some inches, so it's very small. So I think they kind of came and said, how about like a 15 or 20% reduction, so it's a 40-inch range. But again, I want to see it. I want to see what it looks like physically, and then the night renderings are, I think, important because it's going to be lit. So we want to be able to see it. We want to be able to see it. Suzanne?
Isn't there, you said there were variances?
Yeah, there's some variances regarding where you put the sign on the side of the building, how much signage you can have based on the square footage of the building and what you can have for square footage of the signs. Morely, it's how close to the windows the signs can appear. Variance was granted for that
From zoning?
from zoning.
Well, as a planning board, we can kind of still,
No, I mean, we don't, yeah, I mean, we look at it with that into consideration, but again, aesthetics, we're looking at it from the aesthetics perspective, not whether it is
well, that's
zoning
what I'm saying,
approved.
what I was saying, because for me, the aesthetics of it, when you're driving a highway, I don't know of another building that has anything like that.
No.
And that sets a precedent, and then it's almost like a billboard
Mhm.
in many ways. And well, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Next month.
Yeah.
Byron?
Oh, we have to talk about it next month?
Well, the applicant's not here to defend
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
Well, in that case, I will say I don't have problems with it. You know, some signage is attractive from the way. I think, for example, that some of the signage that you can see at night going along 393, or 293 rather, in Chester actually enhances the city. Dying signs like that. Are they like a billboard? Well, maybe, but I understand. I guess let's talk about it when we have the revised designs.
I think I would like, I'm not going to be here next month. I think it would be nice for the staff to kind of look at, I know Ralph Building has a sign, but I don't believe it's lit. Just don't know if we want to really set a precedent.
Signs on the backs of the
Steakhouse
buildings are a little unusual, so we don't have a lot of signage on the backs of those buildings yet,
And the height.
and the height, and the fact that it's in the middle of the building.
Can I share a few things?
Yep.
So, I just wanted to share a few things. When the applicant came to here, they did have examples of other hotels, specifically in Concord, that had internally illuminated signs that face the highway. So the Holiday Inn is one. Of course, it's much closer to the highway, and the sign is much smaller. So they did show examples of other buildings that had internally illuminated signs. However, I think there was a misunderstanding because the applicant, the representatives from the applicant met with myself and Matt Walsh, and they came to the development team numerous times to talk about sign, and they recommendations. They changed it. We went through several revisions of this. And it got down to, well, we still think it's too big, needs to be shrunk, but we're happy with what you've done with it so far. I think they went to ZBA, and the ZBA showed that they said that they went to ADR. ADR was in support of this proposal, which was the case.
Right.
I don't think they realized that they did not go to ADR. And further, staff's recommendation that it was too large. So that was the final, from staff side. So I think ZBA may have acted realizing that, one, they hadn't been to ADR, and two, staff was still contending that the sign was too large. So Craig is actually investigating, is this enough of a change to revisit the fact that they variance for the size? I don't know if we're going to go down that road or not. But, so there's a number of things going on there, and the applicant's not here, obviously, to speak on their behalf. So ADR had recommended that they come back, a smaller sign, and that they show what it would look like at night.
So let's just say, for argument's
And it was called a billboard by another member of ADR as well.
Because I'm just wondering, I know that the firm that bought the building at Weston was Horseshoe Plaza. The Horseshoe area, do you know?
Raleigh.
Yeah, that. But if there was, let's say that whole building was a law firm, what's preventing?
Right.
Right. And there's
McLean.
certainly people in this building than there is
I'm
at
just-
the Hotel
Is
Concord.
that part of, that whole design guideline, what we want our downtown? I mean, the dome has always been the icon and the most prominent thing, and we start down this slippery slope of illuminated signs on the backs of buildings. Where does that? So that would be, so I couldn't be here next month. That would be my comment.
Okay. Does that sound like a motion to table until next month?
Yes.
If you'd make that motion, Suzanne? Or I'll make it.
You can get.
I'll make the motion to table the application.
I'll even make it.
Okay. I'll let you make it. It's been seconded by David, our Mr. Second. Motion's been made and seconded to table this application as submit, and we will revisit that next month. If they get back to ADR, they'll have to go to 8 first.
Correct.
Okay.
Take a vote, don't we?
Okay.
We have to take a vote.
Yes, we do. So motion's been made to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. So that has been tabled. Let's move on to item 7B.
7B is Warren Street Architects requesting ADR approval on behalf of Bangor Savings Bank to place the facade of the building at 7682 North Main Street in the Central Business Performance District.
Okay. Welcome back. Or welcome. Could you state yours for the record?
My name is Jonathan Hawley. I'm with Warren Street Architects, and I'm with Dave Tulip, CJ Developers, representing Bangor Savings Bank.
Great. Welcome to the table. If you could tell us a little bit about the project.
So if I've got a little handout that augments what you've already given, pass it around, and they can just, if I can.
If we could have you guys in on the sheet too, that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the video work?
No.
No, I
Don't click on the video link, whatever you do on the You've got the video link?
yes.
Put it home.
Worked on mine. I did it at the office, so it does look nice. It worked on mine.
So I'm going to walk you through what we're trying to do here. So Bangor Savings has bought 7682 North Main, Street, which is the So if you look at the front photograph, it's going to show you the block that we bought, and there's one portion that is 3 stories high, and then there's a portion that is 2 stories high. This building, we actually went back and did a lot of research historically to find out what had been here. Earlier, there's a couple of photographs that follow. This building was renovated in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The ground floor is an aluminum front glaze system that runs basically end to end, which has been, even the doors on the far end, which used to be the chip shop, they have sold, but they're still wide open because we can't shut them. So there's a fiberglass panel, sign panel that is below the second floor windowsill and it's down to that storefront that is really just a quarter-inch thick fiberglass system with like an H extrusion that just covers the steel that's carrying the brick.
That's what this is.
The second and third floors, the second floor, again, was renovated in the 70s. The walls were taken out and these funky bay windows were in. And although they're very nice inside when you're in those spaces, you know, you see me, they're not consistent to what was originally there. So the only portion of the building that really goes back to the original is the third story furthest to the north. So what we're proposing to do, Bank bought the entire building. The mandate that they gave was they wanted to do a very contemporary statement. They wanted the elevation to be cohesive and look like one building and not two. And I'm going to try to explain how I went about coming up with what we came up with. We did go to ADR, talk it through. There was kind of a split. I'll let Heather explain that, but there was kind of a split conversation. A couple of members said, you know, leave it the way that it was, and a couple of others said, no, we want you to come back and show us the possibilities of the third floor windows in some fashion. And I have that in this packet so that you can see it. So we didn't ignore that. But I do want to say that since our ADR's, the visit to ADR, Bangor has reviewed it, argued about it, talked about it, and come back and said we really would like to approve the original concept that we went to ADR with, which you'll see. There's one other component in the back of the alley. We are adding a stairwell within the footprint of the building that will go from the second to the third floor. So right now, there's only a single means of egress out of the third floor.
Say that again, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
I believe in the packet that Heather distributed, there you see in the back elevations on the east side, yeah, there's a small tower that comes out of the second floor and creates a tower on the third floor, which is going to give us a stairwell to the floor. So the stair that we're adding within the footprint of the building.
So it's on page 15 of your packet on your pads there. The stairway that I'm seeing, it looks like I see through the stairs. Is that being added on?
Kim,
Is this bump out being added on?
No, it's within the existing.
It's within the existing,
within the existing.
and that's what we're talking right there,
Yes,
right?
so
Okay.
it's just that two floors.
Okay.
It doesn't go, it stops at the second floor, so to get the proper egress.
The rear property line is the alleyway in the
Yeah.
back, and the building is 2 stories.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Sorry for doing.
Nope. So it's not going to play. So second photograph in the packet that I just passed out to you was a photograph we got that dated, I believe, 1910-ish, which showed that the first floor of the building was historically amazing. It did step in. It had a couple angled walls, and perhaps in time there were some cast iron columns that you might see that are similar to on Mark Zabrowski's or the Bagel Works, maybe in front of the cooking, things are cooking, or but essentially it was a small granite plinth along the bottom. It was a brass rail, might have been a horse rail at the time or something like that, but it was glazed with a black band, which could have been the steel that's carrying the brick above that ran across, and there were canopies that, awnings, if you will, that come down from there, but essentially all the way across the building. And the second floor had punched windows. That's right, you see right there. So you can see what happened is they actually took out the brick between the windows with those funky picture windows sometime in the 70s. The third page that you're going to see is actually a CAD drawing of what we are proposing. And unfortunately, yeah, no, because this that I was going to show you was actually was in Photoshop, and you don't have Photoshop on the Can Open. So this will be the next one that I go through. I just wanted to try to explain to you the reasoning here. So, if I may, on the first floor, when we haven't totally taken up a building, but we spent some time trying to figure out what's there. The entire ground floor is basically needs to be demoed. There's nothing there waving. It's aluminum. It's old single pane glass. It's fiberglass panels. So we're removing the entire first floor. On the second floor, what we're proposing to do is actually the arrangement of the grouping of 3 windows is actually in the picture window opening. So we're adding 2 columns of brick. Those 2 columns of brick are a different color than what exists today. We're also adding roughly a 42-inch parapet wall in a different color. If I may, can I?
Yeah,
I think
please.
it's easier for me to point it here. So these column brick facade pieces are being added inside the picture window opening. I hurt myself with this. These here, okay? And then we're adding a 2-inch parapet wall again. So this is in a dark brown brick. This is in a dark brown here. Most of the brick that exists was painted several times, so it's going to be sandblasted. I'm never going to match it, so what I'm proposing to do is to do something that looks 180 degrees of that.
So contrast it as try to match it. Yeah.
Our proposal here is to keep the corbelling on this existing 3-story building, but where that corbelling turns in, and it's about a 4-inch indent, is to remove all of the brick here in that facade. Inside the building, Bangor is going to have a 2-story space, and the 3rd-story space up here would be a conference room at that particular floor. So what they're trying to do, so if I may, this band that you see here that wraps all the way around is actually a projection that comes out 2 feet. Essentially what we're trying to do is create a ribbon that ties the whole building together, but we're also using it to actually cover the edge of everything that we're removing. So that this becomes the canopy over the door. It wraps up, creating a very high glass present on Main Street so that Bangor Savings can have their signage. We'll be back to ADR later when this signage, and know what the tenant is over here. So that's not part of tonight, but that's their intent. The ribbon wraps around, becomes a canopy all the way across the front, comes back down, connects, and actually runs as the sill all the way across. Originally, we actually proposed for there to be a bench, to have it actually checked into the sidewalk 2 feet, but the comments that we got back from a number of people in town is that it would be a bed, and unfortunately, it's just not something that they wanted to entertain. So we're looking at the entire facade as being very asymmetrical, trying to tie it together. On the 3rd floor, this roof piece, they're actually talking about putting in actually a roof deck that's accessible from the 3rd floor. So on each end, this would be a granite veneer. It'd be a granite, small granite veneer here. This band here that would be a canopy, if you will, that would project out 2 feet. Actually have solar panels that actually rest across the top of that. It's part of their program and their identity. They've done that in a number of branches that they have all over Maine. So I'm going to jump ahead, if I may, and just talk a little bit. The next one here. So the comments that came back from ADR, at least discussion in that, was that Liz wanted us to look at the possibility of saving these two windows that have this sort of crown molding on the top of the window. And the second comment was, is there a way that there could be less glass along the storefront and there more of a continuous band of the building coming down in part of that facade? And I would suggest to you that I'll take a shot at myself. So the concept that we did was a little bit different, and the bank came back and said it looked like somebody smiling, with the two eyes and the wide open mouth. So we're kind of stepping backward in terms of the presence, the verbal presence looks like this is being, that it's part of something else. It's not being incorporated into the whole, if you will. That this element now just doesn't, in my mind, doesn't respond or sort of respect the whole piece, where here there's some sense to why we're doing it. We carried this band down, which was a suggestion to try to divide that this is going to be a tenant space, and they are in conversations with a brewery, and it becomes the bank space. The third one actually brings a little more brick down, if you will, which again, it's my opinion, and that it's not as cohesive, and it doesn't achieve what the bank asked to try to do from the very beginning. In addition to the facade here, everything is asymmetrical. Nothing lines up. And it's inherent in what kind of the palette you from the very beginning. These columns, if you will, for this trellis that goes across, doesn't line up with a, random. What we did, what compounds the asymmetry at the top. So,
I didn't even notice it until you said it. Now that's all I can see. So.
yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the signage. So I know we're not talking sign, but I want to get it from if there's a big glass tower in the side there on the left with Bangor Savings Bank, is that on the out of the glass or inside?
It would be on the outside of the glass. It would be an internally illuminated sign.
Okay.
That's what we've suggested. That would be against the glazing, and this is actually stand up top of the canopy.
So you'd see if you were inside, then see the back of the sign?
You're going to see the back of the sign, but you're seeing it, there's a two-story space there, if you will. I think your original packet has the floor plan that says it was proposed a month ago.
Yeah, it does.
Can chime in on some of the comments we heard from the design team of why we were trying to accomplish. Bangor Savings is a very big community bank. They do a lot of reach out to the bank and done some of these more historic sort of renovations. What they liked about especially the first is that streetscape. So you kind of bring the outside in, the inside out, so you can really have that rhythm as you're going down. Don't hide behind a lot of petitions or anything else, so they really want to have that open look.
Yes. All right. Go ahead.
Did you have more?
Just the last two pages show you a picture of what exists today. And although this is a dark photograph, it shows you what those windows look like on the third story of.
Did you more? I didn't cut you off, did I? Sorry.
No, just one more thing. And the third floor, when we looked at the revised ADR, made the suggestion they just wanted to take a look at it. We looked at it. It kind of felt like an attic space, like it was kind of forgotten, or you ran out of money and you left that up there. It didn't tie in the bottom. And our vision of that space is to have a conference room. So when you look up on Main Street, you see some activity, you can see some people, and you bring Main Street in and out. So that was a lot of it. And the last was on the third floor, there was a fire years ago over that 2 section, and we're trying to bring that trellis, bring that back to life. And they've done it on 3 different projects now. We have the 2nd floor outdoor space, maybe a 3rd floor outdoor space. Been to several different community events. It's cool. You just, a night like tonight where it's comfortable, you're looking over Main Street, people are looking up. It gives you that feel that this building's alive, and it doesn't go to sleep at 3, 4 o'clock, or we're not walled off when the people are there. So that was a lot of intent of the design, is to really bring the community into the building. So thank you.
So if I can show you this real quickly, this clip here that gives you some context. Actually from Center Street all the way to this property, they're all 3-stories. And then the fire in the 40s took out this building, left that hole well on the 3rd floor, and then it's 3 stories until you get BVS. So this gives you some idea in terms of context of what we're trying to do. That unfortunately the building is actually a little bit lower than the building on either side. So even the 3-story building is lower in height than further to the north. But what, you know, the whole idea of there being a 3rd-story roof deck is to try to fill in that void in a way that's not too expensive, but that expresses that it's a space that's active. I know the lighting's hard, but
Be a place for a rooftop bar from the brewery restaurant downstairs.
They asked already. That's not going to happen.
Yes, Heather, go ahead.
So I was
Oh,
going
yeah.
to make comments.
Yes, go ahead. Well, let's have Heather first.
I was just, pause it for just a moment.
Yep.
So ADR had wanted to see these options, and they recommended that they come back to see options, but I know the applicant was hoping to maybe have the board decide what they think is best and render a decision so that they didn't come back for another month. And I would just, from my perspective, I agree with what you're saying about the 3rd floor. I don't think the steps are compatible with keeping the 3rd floor with the contract for the bank. But the one option that I would have liked seen, because I was one of those people who felt like it was too much glass, which is why I asked you to pause it here, because you really see from this video, this is wonderful, by the way, that this video and this rendering is really amazing. I wish I ever used stuff like this. But you can really see how it might feel glass. I know one of the things that Liz said was that she felt like the partitions of bringing the brick down sort of break up glass a little bit and make the rhythm of Main Street is more typical of the rhythm of Main Street, because most of the stores are about, if you were to break it up into those 3, like they're showing on the bottom here, that's kind of more typical of the rhythm of the rest of the stores on Main Street. And one thing that I felt like was I would have wanted to see it with the full glass, but with those partitions on the bottom, because I think that I agree with you about the cohesiveness of the building. I don't necessarily think that those partitions break up the character, you know, the message that they're trying to send with this. So that's what I think would be interesting to see. That's just my perspective. But yeah, if you could push the play so we can see going down the street and you can just see how sort of the rhythm of the rest of the street, and maybe this is okay. Maybe we like this.
I like the side in particular.
Yeah.
Coastline.
It's nice to live on the seashore.
It's really, you can really see the character, I think, that they're going for that. But to me, it felt a little office-y, you know, Wall Street office-y versus the Concord. But is it on the seats? Yeah, so I think a combination of this and this might be interesting, because you keep that rhythm, but you keep that message there. But I know now that the people, what was really important to them at ADR were those 3rd windows, and they just wanted to see what it would look like. In my opinion, you're sort of showing that it doesn't necessarily, the two elements don't really go together.
The one right now we did, and when we were playing around with it, we had, because one of the features of Bangor Savings, they have a barrel sort of canopy, and it was Phil Hastings who looked at it and ruined the picture of everyone, because it had the 2 eyebrows, and it looked like a frown. So we can't spend this
figures.
sort
That's
of
Phil.
money
Phil
and
did that,
and
right?
have a sad building. And every time you look at it, it's like,
Yeah, that's all you see is the sad
Right,
building.
you have to pull away from any decision-making.
So, there has, asked us to proceed as fast as we can with the concept of perhaps seeing some of this outside facade work done this fall. We're not going to be back for signage or inside work until spring, because that's going to take some more conversation about programming and what actually ends up here in the building. Milestone's been hired as the construction manager. The mason that's coming off the court is anxious for more work, and this is a big, stay right here. So that was our mandate. Heather, I think, to what you're talking about, I think things are subjective. I think that Bangor's, their premise here was make it look out like one building. Make it look progressive, make it look like it's one property, two properties that have existed. And, I think you could argue as you walk down the street that many of the facades have been broken up into halves or thirds, and they kind of create their own storefront. So there's beauty in that, but there's also clutter, if you will, that, there's all this along the way. And then you have no different than Merrimack across the street that has a series of white sort of arches that stretch across, or Citizen Bank that is glazed on the bottom in a similar fashion, but has a lot of teak wood that sort of wraps it.
So, hang on, just for the record, I love the design, love the look, love the feel. I think I love the roof deck. I like the thing about it. I really hate giving up the windows. And reviewing the ADR notices, I was questioning, was it too far on the end, and we're giving up some of that classical Concord storefront location, storefront in the front. I like the brick down to the sidewalk, but again, every time you look at it one way, it's subjective, and somebody says, "I'll look at it this way," or look at it with the barrel top, and all you see is round. You look at it the same way. I was inclined to that. I really like the two window design, the concept number 3, and the brick coming down. But I don't know. I'm going round and round. So I'll let Byron give us his 2 cents.
Hey, Chief, here's my 2 cents. Jonathan doesn't always like my input, but we usually come something in the middle. Believe it or not, months ago, I walked down Main Street and looked at what I would consider to be the developable pieces of property that would still retain the historic infrastructure of Main Street, which frankly is what I think brings people to Main Street, as well as the shopping amenities and the dining amenities. It's the nation because of its unique look. And I actually looked at the 2-story section of this building, and I said, that certainly could go, because it's obviously been changed so much. All the things that you said, Jonathan. And when I looked at you, and I think, first of all, that Bangor Savings Bank got their money's worth with you, because I think that your concept was really terrific. And then I looked and I realized we were losing those windows, which may seem like a small thing. And I also appreciate excuse me, your idea of, preserving them, putting them in the lobby or whatever. But we've done that in other buildings, and I'm very concerned that that's a slippery slope. I mean, theoretically, we could tear down the State House and keep the Eagle and put it inside the new building, and say, well, we're honoring the building, but the building is gone. And I love the Skytop meeting place as well. I personally like to see it as a but, I'm fine with the glass bottle. I really don't see the need to break up this. I think that that's a lovely part of this design. But I really am concerned about losing those historic windows. Because then it's an ahistoric building. You have retained the cornices, but what you call it around. I wasn't trained as an architect, as many architects will agree. But I am concerned, I don't have a problem with the revised design with those windows. I don't find them obtrusive. And again, it links this building to Concord's historic past. You know, the other changes I think are dynamite. I love them. But, you know, I have to note that in our new downtown guidelines, guideline 4.1 says historic buildings, including their architectural designs, fenestrations, which I think means windows, materials and design intent should be preserved. Facade renovations should adhere to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. You know, we just put those guidelines together, particularly specifically for instances like this, when we have new redevelopment opportunities, but we want to make sure that we don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg by redeveloping our city into something that is not as attractive as what we have today. So that's my 2 cents.
That's more sense, but we'll let you speak. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Suzanne?
Well, I have to agree that I think that leaving the windows with the concept that you would choose does not work at all. So it either has to be all or nothing, and then in my view, the windows have to go. But I honestly think that the pedestrian storefront is by far more important that what people are going to experience, and I don't know that they're going to miss 2 windows, but I think keeping them to look not great. And I'm imagining that atrium kind of thing will be probably lit for the most part.
Yep.
So I kind of go back to, I don't even know what building, but there's that connector down towards Eagle Hotel that's kind of crazy, you know, it's triangular. It connects
The bay window that kind of...
Well, no, it's kind of like, it's a funky connection between, filled in a spot.
The Sheridan sign?
Is that what
Sheridan,
it is?
yeah.
So I see what you're trying to do. I don't understand the client wants to make it look like it's all one building, because obviously there's going to be some kind of a lease space. I don't, it bothers me a little that you had so much lighting on it that brings too much attention, like the lighting on the second floor. You're going to have that tower lit. So I would kind of look at that a little. I agree with Heather when I was watching the video that I think the pedestrian experience is very urban. And that's what lacks some of the detail that I think the storefronts in Concord really have. Whether or not you can have, you know, a wing that's part of the building that breaks it up, or even like when you look at the pictures of what's there now, you have that fenced off area. You know, on Common, they have all those restaurants that they open up the windows, and that was my first thought, that's why you wanted it, so that on that main street, said you could have that open, like garage door look, which would be kind of cool for down. So I think what Heather said is like to keep the tower and then try to make that store be more pedestrian scale and not so different than what's downtown. It's just really, really different.
Can I just point out, I stopped the video at this point, that there may not be the locality that you see on a regular basis on the storefronts that exist there today, but there is the horizontal projection, and there's a base that's proposed that rounds the whole piece.
It does make it look kind of like when you're going through a strip mall. It's all, and I'm not saying not pretending to do your job, it's just the vertical piece. It's like either the articulation or that experience of just a scale and not a bank of glass windows. And I know that within those windows, the use would be pretty obvious. Part of it's going to be the bank, and part of it's going to be something else, right? So they're going to be using that floor. And the second floor is bank?
Office space bank.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, I agree with Heather that I would prefer to see the tower as it is and lose those, but maybe get something back about that pedestrian scale of the glass. You've got like at least 3 different opinions, or 2 different opinions?
I'm going to give you a fourth.
Oh, no.
Building. You're separating the retail, that rental space that you're going to, it'll be retail or whatever it's going to be. When you look through that glass, are you looking at a wall that's separating those two? Is there a partition wall that separates your rental, your retail space from the banking space? So when you look through that, one of the panes of that glass, internally, seeing the edge of a wall?
You will. That wall's is thick, and the extrusion that's holding the glass up is 2 inches, so it's almost transparent. You'll have about 3/4 of an inch of drywall on both sides of the...
A 4-inch.
Yeah, 4-inch wall.
You'll just see the edge of it. And
And I can point out 10 office buildings we've done where medical office walls fall right into the window. And
yeah, that's...
you don't know it.
It's like I didn't plan for something.
No, we want it.
I understand that, but we've planned, you know, where the break on the glass is and where that wall would be. I think...
Well, getting back to then Heather's argument, or her opinion, is that in concept 2, you've really defined the 2 spaces with that vertical. I'm not necessarily supporting concept 3 that has 2 of those separations, but yes, the middle one, then now that delineates the end wall looking through a piece of glass. Sort of. And it, you're getting, I understand, a lot of
Yeah,
backs, but go ahead.
well, Mr. Chairman, my name is, for the record, Philip Hastings with Memoirs and Bass. I was the one who shot down the Frown building. If you had a Smile building already, it had a good tone.
Don't want to be known as the Frown Building?
I will speak to a couple of points. Sitting in the audience and having sat through the ADR session last week, but I'll start with Mr. Champlin's point about the Main Street guidelines. I think the applicant has taken those proposed guidelines into consideration in coming up with this plan. And I think what in the focus on 3rd floor windows, the board seems to be losing focus on the fact that a fair amount of this building is being restored to its historical conception as shown on those photos. The 2nd floor windows on the what do you call them, Jonathan? The picture windows. The picture windows are horribly out of character with the rest of Main Street with the historic conception. So this responds to that in a way that's consistent with the Main Street guidelines. I think there's a little give and take that has to be given here, and that comes to my second point, which is having sat through the ADR meetings, we had, 5 architects there, plus staff. We probably had 5 different opinions on how this building should be designed. I've heard at least 3 different opinions tonight on how this has been designed. The applicant has spent a lot of money on a highly qualified architect come up with something that meets both his programmatic needs as well as complying with ordinance in the spirit and intent of the city. You've got a bank that's coming into town, making a commitment. They, in fact, already bought this building. They're making a commitment to restore a building that is, in many eyes, an eyesore. At some point, I would suggest the board needs to have a little bit of deference to the applicant and the applicant's architect. They've tried to incorporate, they've listened to the concerns. There is some give and take, but we're looking for some sense that what applicant has proposed is good for Main Street, and I think I've heard that expressed here. This is a good design overall. I think we're getting in the weeds a little bit, respectfully.
Well, I think restored might be, I mean, yes, you're changing the building and you're getting rid of the windows, but, you know, the picture that we see with the 9/11, I think he said the facade of the building had 4 individually separate windows across the space. So, I mean, restoring it is relative, I guess, in my eyes. We're modernizing the building, I'd say, from the design perspective, as far as contemporary design. I'm not saying we don't love it. I think it's a well-needed change to the building that's there, but I just want to be cautious of, you know, we're not restoring it to what it was originally looked like. We're getting rid of ugly windows and putting in less, it's not being restored back to original P. So did you have a point? With the RPs, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Hastings' comments. I would just respectfully suggest that at some point in the history of the planning board, someone sat where you're sitting. Those picture windows are going to look really great there. And I welcome Bangor Savings Bank, to Concord. And I in fact meant to mention that I appreciate their commitment to, in addition to their office space, to using part of their thing as a gathering place, as a bar and a pub. But ultimately, it's the city of Concord and the people of Concord and future generations that have been inheriting what we do. I'm sure that Bangor Savings Bank will be in business for 200 years. But in my experience, banks are absorbed by other banks, are absorbed by third banks, and eventually that space will be used for other things. And what my perspective is just trying to make sure that we don't start setting precedents where it's okay for us to get rid of this piece, that piece of the historic infrastructure. And in the end, we end up with none of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Heather?
I know I emphasized at the beginning that they wanted to sort of move forward with this. I'll just reiterate, ADR's recommendation was to see these options. They wanted to know what it looked like. I think they're right that they had a lot of different opinions at ADR, but they had some consensus as well. No one insisted that they keep the windows, wanted to see what it looked like. And the people who weren't really concerned about the windows also said they would be interested to see what it would look like. So I don't know. They're with the glass with the glass in the bottom. Even the people who at first, I love everything about it, it's great. After they looked at the glass a little bit more and watched the video, say, oh, you know what? That's kind of a lot of glass. We'd like to see what it looks like. Breaking up the facade. I don't know. I'd be interested to see if what they did have to say about these options. I mean, I think you've had these 3 options, but then there's solutions people. There's 2 additional options that have been suggested tonight, over and above what you suggested. So, more often than not, I think they do come to consensus on things.
If I may, Mr.
Go ahead. Yep.
Just trying to put the pieces together and hearing what the development team had said, the component that they felt out of place was keeping the 2 windows above it. It just, when they looked at the rendering, they didn't want it to look like that attic space. But adding the brick on the side, 1 or 2 plates, they were comfortable with that to create that, to lessen up that glass. So if that's something the board is comfortable with, that's something that Bangor Savings would be comfortable with this evening.
So for clarification, is losing the windows in, say keeping concept 1 that we're looking at, concept 1, which would get rid of the windows on the top floor, right?
Yep.
But put in the breaks down, say on concept 3, the brick on concept 3. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, except the...
Or even concept 2, I guess.
Concept 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that would work for the client.
Something that she just
Hang
did.
on, David.
I just cut and pasted it.
We just cut and pasted.
Yeah, that would work. That looks lovely.
And it looks lovely.
Yeah.
It really is.
Matt,
Just for the record, I just want to go on the record and say that I don't at all like the modern design with the windows. I think that concept one without the windows makes sense to me. It doesn't at all make sense with the windows still there.
Okay. And David, you would just comment about the cut and paste. Any other comments? Carol?
Well, Heather beat me what I was going to say. And I am very supportive of the full windows on the tower and concept 2 on the sidewalk. I was also trying to figure out if there was a way to take the decoration above the 2 third-floor windows and make that on the middle window of each of the 2 second-floor groups. But I don't think that's going to work. But
Yeah.
I thought about it.
We don't have enough of them. I mean, I think it would kind of feel out of play.
Well, if it's the middle one, I think it could potentially work with the rest of your horizontal stuff.
And that you see that runs across the grouping of windows is actually a granite, or
Yeah.
it's a stepped out brick, plinth, if you will, the way across. So in order to incorporate that last picture in your packet that I passed out, those caps, if you will,
Right.
in those 2 windows is actually a casting that is embedded into the brick. So I would have to break that.
No, I rejected the idea, but I just want you to know that I had considered it.
Barry?
Thanks. I just wanted the record to say that I respectfully disagree with Suzanne. I like your lighting plan, by the way.
It will be tastefully done. It's not going to be
Well, I
bright
know.
or decorative.
No, and I think appropriate lighting is really needed. Facade lighting is needed in downtown, so thank you.
You can come back and talk to Suzanne about trees for the rooftop deck. She's going to want to weigh in on what you put up.
No invasive species.
No.
So again, I'm very, I don't like to step on ADR toes, but I think I have a good understanding of what they were concerned about, what they're asking about. And typically, when we see those recommendations, we'll push things back to the board. I'm sensitive to the fact that you want to get this project off the road and don't want to delay it a month if we can. So I'd like to try to come to consensus and figure out if we can move forward. Teresa, do you have a question?
I do have a question on concept 2 and 3. Is break in the wall on the bottom, where the pins are on the bottom, is that where the tenant break
Yes,
is?
yeah.
Okay,
So it'd be, I think, like in between, so a little brick would go on the bank side, a little would go on the retail
So
side.
you would not see that internal wall?
Not see that.
Okay, just wanted clarification for that, thank you.
And I don't disagree about breaking up that glass. I think, I could go either way, but breaking it, I think, visually, it still lets you in, but it gives it some of that verticality.
I have some thoughts on the signage as well, just for you. We love the lighting package in the sense of upload for the cornice, so we'll want to see some rents with that on that upper floor cornice. If there's any way to do anything underneath the 3rd floor rooftop, that would be great, if there's any opportunities there. But signage is a big deal for us, so we're going to want to see some nighttime, some daytime rings.
We're in the infancy on
Yeah,
signage.
no, I understand that. I want to give you a heads up on that.
Perfect.
So, any other questions from comments from staff? Any other comments from staff? Any member of the audience wish to address this application? Can't see everybody, but let your sound, okay? Nobody? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing portion. Stay right there if you'd like. Any other discussions or comments, concerns? Do we to recognize that AR did recommend coming back? And again, I'd like to get through it if we can. I didn't see, Heather, anything that we need to do other than to recommend or deny approval of ADR. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. No comments? No? Okay. Suzanne?
If ADR saw the
Yeah.
concept with the windows remaining, that they would probably say,
Yeah,
it doesn't look very good. So can I make a motion?
You can, if you'd like.
I would make a motion that we take the tower part of concept 1 and just bring it down to concept 2 and have the layout of the windows be concept 2. So you've got you've got a larger bank of windows on the east side than you do on 3, and I think that's advantageous, so I think would go.
Can I just point something out, though, because I'm interested in your comment here. You follow my cursor. On this particular, what you're seeing here is that metal projection that becomes thin all the way around. Again, going back to what I was talking about is adding a darker brick option to where we're adding brick back into the building. And right here, that's pros. So I just want to make sure that you understand that the band, that ribbon, is delineated in the same color. And I'm just questioning in my mind, the two ends were granite plinths, if you will. We're infilling there, so it's granite on the ends, on both sides here and on this piece. And then there's a random piece of brick in the middle. So I'm kind of questioning, as you do this here, and we're going to run with it, whether or not that should be granite. Because as you walk down...
Good point. Yeah. And it's lighter color, too.
I'm just saying, we're designing by committee here, and it's on the run. And
so how about if we give you a little bit away? Can't believe I'm going to say this.
Don't.
A little bit of leeway to say that we want it to be broken up and the stone's there, but we'll give you some leeway. I don't want to. We got an emotion, but I want to just make sure clear, because I want to make the right decision. I don't want stucco there or something like that. But I mean, I think that's, if it's granite, it's in character, I think, more than the brick would be, especially if it's the darker brick, right? What you're saying? So it would be granite, that whole piece down?
this here.
So all the way to the ground?
Well, this whole piece that sits above that.
Above the...
So if I could just, let me here a second. Trying to follow it. It's hard because it's, I wish I knew how to do this. It's hard because the colors here, this is a dark brick, so you've got granite that closes the end, and then this wraps around. Now we're going to have this piece. So I want to be clear.
I might be able to help because Penn Savings is building a new headquarters on the waterfront in Bangor. And we have this sort of structure, and the first floor ended up going granite, and it looks outstanding.
I think that would be fine.
And it ties in with the historic neighborhood
I just don't want to come back because I showed it brick and I thought it granite.
I think it's an excellent idea.
No, I think that's...
And it ties in with the state. I mean, that granite institutional.
So maybe we can modify the motion to recognize concept 2 with either a brick or granite facade as between the two buildings.
I just want to point out that under that ribbon was granite as well. So at least that first base would all be consistent, and the ribbon just comes into it.
Yeah. Right. Good idea.
Yep. What else you got? Any other last minute? Okay, so we have a motion on the table with that modification. If it's been seconded?
Yes.
Right?
Seconded.
So motion and all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? One opposition. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good luck. It's a great look project. Butler Associates, did they cancel? Let's read item 8A into the record. It brings us our site plan subdivisions and conditional permit applications.
Richard D. Bartlett Associates on behalf of Joan L. Laramie and Alexander Felvabel and Marie Delio requesting minor subdivision approval for a 7,000 square foot lot line adjustment between 86 and 90 Rockingham in the medium density residential district. Staff recommends the application be determined complete and the public hearing open.
Okay, we got a determination of completeness component. Staff's recommended the application be determined complete, and we open the public hearing. Motion to do that?
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Asked before. Opposed? That motion carries. We'll open the public hearing. Welcome to the table. If you could state your names for the record, sign in a little sheet if you could.
Good evening. My name is Mark Sargent.
Put it out. Really? Thank you. That's good.
The races.
Normally.
Okay. My name is Mark Sargent. I'm with Richard Bartlett and Associates.
My name's Al Feldwebel. I live at 86 Rockingham Street.
And I'm Maria Dalterio. I also live at 6 Rockingham Street.
Great. Well, welcome to the table. Let's get a little overview, if we can, from staff, and any thoughts on this lot line adjustment?
Sure. This is a 7,000 square foot lot line annexing 7,000 square feet from 90 Rockingham to 86 Rockingham. The applicant has requested 4 waivers from section 1203, subsection 5, wetlands, 12.07, wetlands delineation, 12.08, subsection 4, soil types, and 15.03, subsection 12, soil test. These are common required lot line adjustments because there are existing structures and no further construction proposed. Staff support these waivers.
Okay. And is there subdivision process in this as well? Okay. Okay. Tell us a little bit, if you could.
Sure. I think Sam outlined it fairly well, but 2 properties involved, 86 and 90 Rockingham Street. 86 is identified on map 9B as block 111. It's owned by Alex and Maria. It's an area right now of 0.73 acres with what's unique, no frontage. There is a 10-foot right-of-way that they access of Rockingham Road across map B, block 1, lot 12. 90 Rockingham Street, identified as map 9B, block 1, lot 10, is owned by Joan Laramie, sorry, has an area of 1.6 acres with 195.41 frontage. The lot line adjustment is proposed. You can see, I'll kind of highlight it with the cursor here, but the existing lot line is right here. The property line as it exists today comes within 7.5 feet of the Feldfeld property or house. So they're proposing to annex 40 this way by 175-foot section of property of lot 10, which is 7,000 square feet, to lot 11. So the new lot area for lot 11 will be 0.89 acres or 38,123 square feet. The new lot area for lot 10 would be 1.41 acres or 6,974 square feet. And the requirement in this zone is 12,500.
Okay. Any other comments from staff? Questions from the board? Any member of the audience address this application? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Anybody like a motion to grant this? Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Gotta make sure I do this right. Hang on a minute. Okay. So we've 2 components here. We've got the waiver request under 4.1. Staff recommends the board grant the following waivers as outlined. Section 12.035, 12.07, 12.084, 15.0312. As Sam wrote, would someone like to make a motion to grant those waivers as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And 4.2 is to grant the subdivision approval for the minor subdivision subject to the following conditions and fulfilled within 1 year prior to endorsement of the final plan by the board chair and clerk. Precedent condition 1 through 7 as outlined in your packet. Would someone make a motion to grant 4.2 to grant minor division approval as outlined?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second. Excuse me. Motion's been made and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. They're all set.
Thank you very
Quick
much.
as that. You couldn't have got up here in the first. You'd have been all done and out and home.
That's not Jonathan.
I know it. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, Madam Clerk, let's get to this item if we could on the agenda. Item 8B.
MHF Design Consultants, on behalf of Irving Oil Products, requesting major site plan approval for construction of a convenience store, fueling station, and related site improvements, and 3 conditional use permits to allow a fueling station in the CU district, to allow 2 driveways on a frontage, only 1 is permitted, and to allow less than the required duration between driveways at 22 and 24 Pennacook and 163 North State Street in the urban commercial urban transitional districts. Staff did, this application was determined complete at the last meeting, so the public hearing can be open.
Okay, is the applicant here? Come on up. Okay. get a staff summary, staff update?
So as Heather mentioned, they're requesting 3 conditional use permits with staff supports. There's 2 waiver requests related to stormwater, and those were because of existing conditions, and staff supports those waivers. And then some of the bigger issues that they'll address in their presentation that we've worked with them over the past 2 months are they've taken into consideration future Langley Parkway along Pennacook Street. That's why they purchased those 2 houses to put the driveway where it's proposed. That's to accommodate future development of Langley Parkway on that portion of the street. On our State Street, they've worked with our traffic engineer to design a right-in, right-only driveway to not have the same issues that we have with the CVS on Loudon Road. There's a median, which Irving has agreed to put in a median in North State Street, and they worked with our traffic engineer in the fire department to get that designed, so that'll work within constraints of that site. And then with recommendations from the TPAC, Train and Bicycle Subcommittee, to add a gravel strip between the street and the sidewalk. So they've redesigned that, and they brought those plans tonight to show it's a 3-foot strip and then the sidewalk and then the site itself, and working on a sidewalk easement to have the sidewalk come on the street to accommodate that. So I think those are the big issues.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome to the table. If you guys could state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Frank Montero with MHF Consultants, with the site engineers for Irving Oil.
I'm Heather Monacup with Greenman Peterson. We're the track engineers for Irving Oil.
Jennifer Daigle with Irving Oil.
Great. Welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yeah, sure.
The building there is already down, right?
Yeah.
Gone. Okay.
Yeah. The site was formerly a gas station, as you know, for quite a while. Did you bring a... Okay.
Just minimize that.
Yeah.
The other minimize.
The other minimize?
So those are the 3 things that you said.
Okay. All right, so that's a rendering of site. There's a site plan in here.
Wait, was that in that folder as well? Or it's attached to the agenda as well? Your site. Scroll down. Plans. It's just taking time.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, yeah, this site was for a gas station convenience store. On the site plan here, this is North State Street at the bottom of the sheet and Pennacook on the side. The site closed around 2015 because the existing fuel storage tanks had to be replaced. And part of the issue with replacing them is we knew a future roadway improvements plan at Langley Parkway, which would drastically change access to the site in the future via the construction of a raised median along Pennacook Street here. What am I doing wrong?
You can make it bigger.
We can make it bigger.
I bet boards would be easier.
That's a last resort, the boards.
I didn't see a tripod. So as I mentioned, in the future when Langley Way gets reconstructed, to be a raised median on Penn Street here and a raised median on State Street. So the former lot consisted of about half of this parcel as you see it, and the 2 additional residential lots that we purchased are in this back area here. So in work with staff, it became apparent that it was going to take more land to be able to get access to this site in the future. So Irving actually closed the site, removed the tanks, and we've been working on a redevelopment for a couple of years, which did include buying a couple of parcels. So in regards to access in the future on Pennacook, it was written to the city traffic engineer that this driveway here be located as far as possible from the intersection. This is slightly over 200 feet from the intersection. And basically, the site access or left turn lanes are restricted to this location here. In terms of North State Street, the future median there would more or less make this a right-in, right-out driveway. But due to the timing of the future project, the city felt that it'd be fairly easy to make illegal left turns in this right-in, right-out driveway. So we want staff to actually accelerate part of the Langley Road project on this side by constructing a median in North State Street that would prohibit this left turn into this driveway.
As part of this plan?
As part of this plan, yeah. So we've been with staff on that plan and gone through a couple renditions up to this point. And Heather Monica with GPI will give a brief overview of where that stands. But this is the original site plan that was submitted package, so it still shows a right-in, right-out here. So that's kind of a little history on the access. The layout that we see here is something that was worked on quite extensively with the planning staff in terms of the orientation of the building and the key. The desire from staff to have the convenience store as close to the street as possible, provide streetscape, including large planting areas, pedestrian access from North State Street, and pedestrian access around the site with additional street tree side of the project. So in order to do that, we had to get several variances from the zoning board for some land use back in this transitional zone, which bisects the property here. We get variances for parking between the building and the street, some impervious area variances, and there was one that I can't recall offhand. But in any event, we obtained those variances and then proceeded to the yard to discuss some of the details and work and fine-tune this further. So this layout, we also, as Beth mentioned, need traditional use permits. I won't go into those details. And there were some challenges with the site, believe it or not, topography. The grade of this driveway is 6 higher than the grade of the road here. So we ended up with a cut situation on the site in this back area, and there's a small retaining wall over here, about 3 feet high. But the moral of the story there is we had to get some waiver requests on drainage design in terms of offsets to groundwater table and so forth. But we feel this is a good site layout. It works well for site circulation with the canopy parallel to Pennacook Street here. This is more or less becoming the front entrance to the site, the canopy fronting on Pennacook. This will be our main access point for access to the dispensers here. The fuel truck would enter the site through this driveway as well, so in this part of the parking lot, and then fuel storage tanks are located here, and they'll circulate back out that driveway. So the core component of making the site work, left turn movements in the future at this location. We do have 6 driveways now on these 3 lot line, and we're reducing that into 2. So we feel that's much improved in terms of circulation. I'll ask just to update you on where we are with this driveway on this side. It's been modified such that it's narrower. There's no raised island in the middle because we have a raised median in the street. We've been working with the fire department regarding their access across the street because the median does affect the southerly driveway to the fire station. So we've had some modifications to that. Additionally, we've been asked to take this landscaping here and move it inside as far as possible to give flexibility in the future to what happens on Langley Road in terms of that future widening. Heather, do you want to go over that?
Yeah. Is my recent plan in that folder?
It is
Can I
not.
use this?
At your own risk.
Yeah.
Don't
It's
ask me.
okay.
This is a color version of this plan.
So this plan, those two buildings that were purchased are still standing?
Yes, correct.
The two homes are.
The two homes.
Yeah, the convenience store is demolished. They had the environmental restoration, removal of the building and so forth. All the tanks have been moved previously. Brand new underground fuel storage tanks, product piping. This is all latest state-of-the-art underground fuel storage system would be installed. Much moved over what was there.
So for the record, I'm Heather Monica, PI, and this is the site plan was just submitted today. Not site plan, off-site improvement concept plan that we've been working on with city staff. So as mentioned at a meeting weeks ago, there was talk about they weren't quite sure that right in, right out drive that Frank described was going to really restrict lefts out into the site.
Can you zoom in a little bit on that?
Yes.
Up to the right, right.
In the middle.
There you go. Perfect. Just close that find box up there.
The what box? The right.
There you go.
Popped out.
Oh dear. Okay, so that's showing the median. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, no problem.
So we're just with your mouse. This is the Concord Fire Department.
So the emergency vehicles use this where the bays are. This, I'm sorry, is that true? I'm in the way. No, I'm sorry.
There you go, right there.
His head is in the way, so I can't quite see. Sorry. This is the emergency vehicle, where the emergency vehicles come in and out of bays. This is the employee parking driveway, and then this is the driveway that goes into the district area, safety building area. So there's actually 3 drives to this site. Rob Mack was the one that coordinated with the fire department on this design. I had originally pulled this median a little bit further to make sure that, in fact, left sides were going to be restricted. But as long as we got it past the driveway, that's good. What we did here was we're kind of sloping this corner, and I can show you detail once I zoom out a little bit, but to provide access into and out of the employee driveway, we're going to slope that curb just a little bit so that if they had to drive over it to get to it, they would. I think it will still be difficult for you to make a U-turn into the site with the extension of the median this far. So this seemed amenable to the fire department. They've looked at it, engineering staff okay with it. So it is a 4-foot island with in the northbound direction there's a 5-foot shoulder, an 11-foot lane, and a 2-foot shoulder on the median, then the 4-foot median. And then in the northbound direction, we've got a 12-foot turn lane, a 10-foot through lane, 10-foot through lane. As one of the comments in your staff report, they wanted to see a consistent 5-foot shoulder in the southbound direction. We've provided that on this new plan that was previously in your packet that you had seen 4 feet. So we were able to kick the curb over a little, provide that 5 feet that they wanted to see. In doing so, we also are able to provide a 4-foot grass strip along the frontage here. It was only required to do it to the driveway, but we have a utility pole over here, so we followed through and then had it meet existing right after the existing utility pole here. So we have a 3-foot grass strip and then the 5-foot sidewalk. That does require an easement on the property, which is funny that it's not shaded on this. I want to zoom in. Frank's got it highlighted on the plan, but in this area here would require an easement in there and then also in this triangle here. And if you look at Frank's plan, the sidewalk is highlighted in yellow, but the hatches in orange are where we'd be proposing a sidewalk easement on the Irving Oil property. And Irving Oil is amenable to doing that as the language and whatnot in the easement works.
In our packet, is that outlined in our packet, Sam? Easement?
No.
No. Okay.
This literally just happened today.
Okay.
Like hours ago. Yeah.
So somebody make a note of that. We get to this point, that point, I just want to make sure we don't forget that.
Yeah, I mean, the concern with working with Bob on the sidewalk, we went back and forth on the size of the grass strip. We first asked to provide 6 for a grass strip. We couldn't fit 6. We were agreed on a 3. And originally trying to avoid an easement altogether, just to simplify things. But there is a strip of a sidewalk easement along North State Street here, 2 to 4 feet wide, and then there's a triangular piece on this corner. And Irving is, as mentioned, amenable to granting that as long as they're identified against any liability, maintenance, and so forth. So I think that's a little. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's okay. So, that's what's happening over here on North State. So we comply with all the what is official, the Transportation Policy Advisory Committee, the TPAC. That was something that they wanted to see with the 5 shoulders on North State Street. So those provided there. As we go,
Are those bicycle lanes?
they're 5 feet wide to accommodate bicycles.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
And do they go up Pennacook Street, or they stop at North State?
They would be on North State Street here. That's what we've proposed on this. On Pennacook Street, we're not proposing any changes on Penn Street. We will be closing the existing curb cuts that exist. We also will be rebuilding the walk on the right-of-way line to push it as far into the site as possible. And then whatever is left will be a variable width grass strip, which was something that was requested by the city in your staff notes. So as you can see in here, different from what was provided in the link of the agenda, the sidewalk is now along the way line on Pennacook with a grass strip in front of it, and then again pushed back with a grass strip in front of it for where we can on North State Street. It's all I can think of right now. We're providing handicap access and ramp, existing crosswalk. It is going to require some restriping on lanes. But I believe it's my understanding that engineering is pretty much on board with this on a conceptual level, and then we'll have to, if this gets approved, we would move forward with construction documents for the city's approval.
How many parking spaces? Sorry.
That's okay. I don't have the numbers on this plan.
And
17 spaces.
Just 17 spaces, is it really?
Yeah.
Where are they all? So I see 3 on the bottom left, and then I see 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 up above the store. 1 handicap, and 4 more there.
Yeah, there's parallel up.
Oh, and then parallel up on the top?
Yeah.
See them right there.
So what any anticipation on busy this store? I know the street is terribly busy, and I know maybe it's an Irving question, or maybe somebody has done their demographics and looked at the traffic counts and how many people are going by and all that. But how busy is this store? I mean, in a great day, how many people are going to come in and go out of this store? Any concept or any idea?
Oh, yeah, of course. In our traffic study, we have a trip generation section of what we expect a type of site like this to generate. In fact, new Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE trip generation manual has a new 10th edition in that. It's got a land use code called super convenience market and gas station.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, because that's the trend now, these larger convenience stores are not. So this could be overestimating it, because I think some of those super convenience in the ITE actually contain like co-brands, like Dunkin' Donuts or something, which this store will not have. But anyway, according to those numbers, and this is analyzed in our traffic study that was approved by the city engineer, the new trips to the area, assuming the site is closed because it's open today, would be 107 a.m. trips. So that would be any one peak hour from 7 to 9 a.m., 102 p.m. peak trips, and a Saturday 103 peak hour trips in 1 hour total in and out of the site. Those are new trips to the area. As you can imagine, a site like a gas station pulls a lot of traffic from its traffic that's already going
So on
by. So
average-
more traffic will be on the site, but new traffic to the area are the numbers that I just
So peak on average on a morning would be 100, on an afternoon 100, evening 100.
That's
obviously
correct.
slows down and up but
Correct,
appropriately.
new to the area. On the site, it would be a little bit higher. We were able, because there was a gas station there today, we were able to take credit for it. So it's been closed only for 15, I think you said. So, you know, we only had to show our impacts above and beyond that because we could have reoccupied it as the gas station that it was without any permitting. But yeah, uses like this don't draw a ton of new trips to the area.
Sure. Yep. Just pull up.
Just because I'm not sure what you said is actually what she said, a peak hour trip. So you said there's a morning peak hour of about 100 and evening peak hour of about 100, right? That's Monday through,
remember, that's new trips, not there's more on the site.
and that's Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, there's an afternoon peak hour.
An after peak hour.
Right, so it's not morning, afternoon, and night.
Correct, it's a weekend, that
Right,
Saturday
so it's morning and
numbers.
evening during the week, and just to clarify.
But again, average is 100 an hour. So there's 50 an hour beginning of the day, then 60, then 70, then say over the peak hours, it might be as many as 100.
100
It peak down through 50 to 60 and then back up to 100. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's 1,000 people coming through that site.
The new trips, like I was just saying, new trips is 1,000 in a day, yeah.
Keep in mind that the total trips, if it's peak hour, those are, she's just saying the new trips, so there's also the existing trips that are
Existing
factored
trips,
in, so it might be more like
But again, this-
something
Yeah.
higher than
Might be a
100 that
higher
she
projection,
said,
sure.
so.
Yeah.
It will be higher on the site, and those are the little trips, and I can give you those if you'd like.
That's okay.
Any idea of what the impact would be if, in the eventuality that Langley Parkway is completed, and you also have the Langley Parkway traffic?
So actually, traffic study, like I said, we coordinated very closely with MAC on this scope because of where it was and the project that was happening. So we always have to do a future year analysis. Typically, we have to do opening year, which we did 2019, and then we usually look at out 10 years beyond that. But for this project, Rob had us look at 2035 numbers and the Langley Parkway numbers that have been approved. So we add traffic on top of that, and we have minimal impact to the signalized intersection. That's what we looked at, the 6 intersection and our 2 driveways. So we have looked at both with and without Langley in both conditions as requested by your city traffic engineer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Interesting. Okay, you guys all set? Okay, question on the board? Yes.
I'm glad you guys picked up on the cross-section where the sidewalk is separated from the road with a landscape median. I hate using grass median, but I was wondering, on our real cross-section, don't we have more than 3 feet so you can actually plant the trees in it?
There is, but we had to work through a lot of constraints with this site, and there's setbacks because they're across from a residential district. So we were trying to get the 3-foot minimum. We worked with Jeff Warner, was able to that, the 3-foot strip, and all the plantings on the other side of the sidewalk. So if they get back to get a wider strip along the street and have enough room for landscaping on the site side. So we were trying to get.
My point is, couldn't we have less? I mean, I think the landscaping on the inside is probably less important than having the street trees in the landscape median, and then have a 3-foot strip separating the sidewalk. Just kind of reverse it, because I think it's kind of it's a waste. I mean, it's a space, but it's better to have the trees like on Commercial Street. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, but that would be a variance to not provide the landscaping for their requirements.
Well, I think that would be close enough that it would be considered for their parking lots.
And be on their site, it would be within the city's right-of-way. So then the city would take ownership of all the trees that they're planting.
I would suggest that that would be worth the compromise, because I think ultimately the tree, the landscape medium would have a greater impact than on the inside. So I don't, there's wiggle room there.
We also had a lot of concerns with where traffic signals were. We did spend a time in this. Yeah. I'm not trying to brush off your comments.
That it would, a grass strip doesn't do the same thing as a landscape medium. So, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion, because it'll probably end up being more like a dirt strip. But if we have this in there.
I just want to iterate the point about the variance. So if the applicant said, hey, we agree with you and we're going to go back and get a variance, that would be one thing. But that we felt that we had the authority to say require them to go get a variance. Right. Because it would be on their property, and even though if we think it's a great idea, as far as the code goes, they would still need to get a variance. So that's kind of a hard push. It's like we're making them go variance from our code if we were to do that.
Well, I guess if you absolutely have to do that,
Because you can't use vegetation on someone else's property to count towards yours.
I think in this case you could.
Okay, keep thinking about that. Other questions, staff, from the board? Okay, we're going to send you guys back because I think there's a couple of people here that want to speak to this application. So I'll send you back. We'll open the public hearing portion of it formally, even though we've been talking about it. We'll open the public hearing and invite whoever's got their hand up to come on up.
Hello.
Hi, could you state your name for the record?
I'm Gail Snow. My husband and I own property at 27 Pennacook Street. My husband's here. My mother owns the property at 29 Pennacook Street. She's also here in the audience, and they may want to add to my comment, but I just want to go on the record, as I did at the zoning meeting, and say that we are vehemently opposed to this project. As you can well imagine, owning residential property directly across the street from this huge expansion of what was originally there is of utmost concern to us on a number of counts. One being we've owned that house for over 30 years. It's currently rented to a family member who had intended to buy the house. It was my grandparents' house originally. My mother has owned and lived in the house next door for 63 years. So we have a strong interest in that neighborhood, and I believe that Concord is a city that values neighborhoods and the flavor of neighborhood. And this project entails tearing down 2 residential homes directly across the street from us. You've already heard testimony about the extreme traffic there, and you heard about what the increase would mean to Pennacook. In our mind, this project is on a much larger scale than it would be in terms of what impact will be to the neighborhood. The original store was a small convenience store with a gas, and I believe it had 1 pump, maybe two sides, and it faced North State Street. This is turning it around. As you saw, it will face Pennacook Street, and they're requesting have 5 pumps. We don't understand why this project needs to be on this scale other than maybe business considerations, but certainly not what's in the best interest of a residential neighborhood. Our homes are zoned residential, and I've been told that it would be very unlikely for the city to change the zoning of those 2 homes. So we're thinking of the future too in terms of the value of our property. The other point I wanted to make is that it was a very good point.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe you'll remember it while you do it. So you said you're across the street, so the bank is...
Yeah, the vacant bank faces North State Street.
And then the next house is 27 or 29?
27.
Because that's your house,
Yeah,
27.
we're on the other side of the bank.
Okay.
5 or 6 years ago, you're probably aware, CVS wanted to buy that vacant property and make it into a CVS. And that project didn't have the same impact to the neighborhood in our mind because it would face North State Street. It was already a bank there. So that wasn't a major change. This is. This will vastly impact our property and neighborhood. I mean, I don't know if other neighbors that are here will speak, but this is a neighborhood. It's a residential area. That side where Irving is expanding is mixed use, or I'm not sure of the terminology, but I understand that's different over there, but it's directly across the street. So that's really what I wanted to say. If you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Suzanne?
Well, I guess in the past, because one of the things I think the residents are concerned about, and I don't know if it's been addressed, is it a 24 operation?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. 'Cause that was what I wanted to say. If the city is determined to go ahead and approve this project, that is the other thing that we would like to have considered, to make not a 24-hour operation. Last store closed at 11, which made it tolerable. And the other thing we're concerned about is some gas stations will have loudspeakers, so that if a person has a problem with their card in the pump, they can talk to the person in the store. And you know that that echo, that reverberates for blocks. So those are two things. And then, of course, signage, which I know you'll probably take up at a later point. And, you know, the other point, I was really impressed with your consideration of the Bangor Bank project. I mean, this board is very concerned with the care of Concord. And I don't understand why in all the zoning hearings and all this work that's been done with the city engineers, planning department, I don't hear anything about the human impact here. I mean, we have been residents and taxpayers in Concord for over 30 years. We have a strong interest in what happens there.
Well, and I would also, I'm not sure where you would address this. I don't live far from a filling station that closes at like 9 o'clock. One of the issues that was brought up was like they cannot have oil delivered unless it's operating. They can't come at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's a really annoying wake up. So I'm not sure where that gets addressed, if that's our purview, but.
And then again, just thinking about the, 1,000 new cars coming into that station, and then meal deliveries, gas delivery on top of that. If any of you, I'm sure you've driven up Pennacook Street, and, it is a very congested area. A lot of pedestrians as well.
I mean, it would depend on really, and I'm not sure where that gets addressed, but if the other gas station, right here, so the other gas station did close, and there was the respect for the abutters and this residential, and I'm not sure how those two pieces are zoned, that there should be some accommodation for the people that live near there.
Okay, we'll ask the question. Any other questions?
I guess I would say, and I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse, but the anticipating for the applicant referred to it in the long term. What is the Langley Parkway ending there? How is that to be configured? And how does that impact about it being wider? So I don't know what that does to your property.
The problem for homeowners there, we won't have access. Currently, you can back out of those driveways on Pennacook Street. My understanding, and I could be wrong, is that we will not be able to do that with this project and the party. I believe we will only be able to go one way. So.
That's a question to be determined, I think, long term. Yes, Byron.
I just want to say I share that concern. I've been puzzling ever since I was elected to council on exactly how that is going to be configured. Apparently, the Irving people know more than I do, but I hadn't heard that there was going to be a median on Cook Street. But it seems that there's an awful lot of traffic that's going to be kind of pushed through a fairly small, constricted area there. Given the unless something happens to the abandoned bank or the empty bank, or something happens to this property, and something inevitably going to happen to your property if that goes through.
We don't know. Yeah. So thank you for hearing my comments. And,
great. Thank you for your testimony.
Appreciate it,
sir. Oh, shoot. Can we have you sign in? I'm sorry. Could you come up and just sign in to the little sheet that's here?
It's right. It got moved over here.
Oh. Hi. Could you name for the record?
My name is Robert Baker. And that's some testimony I'd like to read into the record.
Certainly.
If you don't mind. If you'll bear with me, I didn't measure this. It was 12 minutes. So, but I feel it's important. I'll be as quick as I can. So thank you for this opportunity to testify in this proposal. As I understand it, the board's role is to implement the master plan, which represents the desires of Concord residents. Major concerns will address the zoning variances granted, traffic, housing, and the impact on the neighborhood. Number one, zoning variances. Master plan recommends that the parking be required behind the building and be at the street. Now, they've described the building as being at the street. I really think of the street as Pennacook Street, and they describe the street at the entrance. So I'll speak to that in a moment. At zoning, given a variance to put the parking in front of the building. But then subsequently, they got an additional variance that allowed them to sell the fuel in the urban transitional area. And my understanding is that they want to get the parking in the front, but then they also wanted the fuel sales. And why now that they have the second variance, why can't they now put the building at the front of the street? It's not clear to me the order of those. At zoning, the applicant also argued that the proposed use will not alter the characteristics of the neighborhood. Also argued that this will not adversely impact the adjoining neighborhood. As neighbor and prior owner to the two-family residence, tenant 26 Pennacook Street, so it would be the prop just west of the two properties they purchased. For 10 years, from 2005 to 2018, my experience suggests otherwise. Exiting the driveway at 26 requires backing into the street. This was challenging, but tolerable with a small gas station at the corner. With our neighbors at 84 Pennacook Street, we found that heavy snowfall, winter snowpack required us to move that snow, and as we cleared the public sidewalks, down east of 24 Pennacook Street towards the gas station. It was all near the sidewalk, and the city would clean that up, part of their maintenance of that area, clear snow. This was the best and essentially only way we could manage snow and safe still back out of our driveways. With this design, that becomes impossible because as you see where the driveway would be just within 10 to 15 feet of that driveway at 20 Pennacook Street. Obviously, I don't live there anymore. It's not my property. At the zoning board hearing, the neighbors across Pennacook Street, the property owners, Petra and Snow, Gail Snow testified on. They testified about the impacts on at the zoning board. They were told by the zoning board their concerns were not of consideration and granted variances. Without legal assistance at the hearing, the neighbors were effectively silenced and concerns disregarded entirely, as evident by the brief discussion and granting all of the variances sought at zoning. In the rebuttal by the applicant, they stated, this will go before the planning board and they will need traffic studies to be done. I'm interested now here that there's a traffic study. That hasn't been publicly available. I'm curious where it is. The city staff from zoning, engineering, planning have had conferences and meetings with the applicant. The neighborhood has had little, if any, opportunity for input until this planning board hearing. The traffic engineer has had considerable influence on the design of driveways with perhaps little direct experience of how the neighborhood functions on an hourly, daily, or seasonal basis, each and every day. My experience over 10 years living on the street and that of our neighbors provide more insight than traffic counts and predictions used by the traffic engineer. Zoning, the applicant argued, this isn't something new that is creeping into a residential neighborhood, when in fact, this is powering the neighborhood in many ways. 5 of those impacts are: 1, existing small mature forest at 24 Pennacook Street, which you could see perhaps on your iPad. provides considerable buffering from the noise, pollution, weather, sun exposure, and heat island impacts of existing pavement from both the intersection and commercial properties, including the Santana Bank, Irving Oil Station, Fire Administration Facility, Bout Wells, and the Rite Aid Convenience and Drug Store. In addition, the City Central Fire Station performs maintenance of their vehicles weekly on their driveway at 150 North State Street. The existing landscape at 24 Pennacook Street provides a critical buffer essential to protection of the neighborhood. The variant buffers and boundaries effectively has superseded reasonable boundary conditions, which should protect the neighborhood on that western edge. Second of the 5 impacts, the excessive impervious coverage, especially at 24 Pennacook Street, with the construction will likely damage the root systems, and now talking about digging 3 feet lower. That's clearly going to damage the existing tree root system on that West Brownlee. Those are mature trees that provide critical protective service, and replacement trees planted in case these mature die will take decades to grow and only they survive and thrive. The likelihood of reinstating an effective buffer are quite slim. Third impact, the applicant has proposed providing a high vinyl fence to buffer the neighborhood where a vegetative buffer is required. Not only is white, green, brown, or brown fence a poor substitute for the existing natural habitat and buffer. The materials of vinyl fence are not neutral. The chemical nature of manufacturing, the potential leaching of compounds, and in the event of fire, the life-threatening noxious fumes from burning vinyl should be considered. 4, the size of the station, hours of operation, lighting, advertising will impact the neighbors. The pre-station had 1 island with 2 pumps and provided 4 fueling nozzles, queuing maybe 4 to 6 fuels. The hours of operation were limited, as you've already heard, and closed at night, with limited hours on Sunday in my recollection. The proposed station would have 5 islands with 5 pumps, up from 1 and 2 respectively, and importantly, 10 nozzles up from 4, with queuing for 20 vehicles, up from 4 to 6. The store will have additional parking at the storefront and along the vinyl fence. As you already know, the hours of operation and the type of fueling pump, think of the video and the speaker advertising, could have an enormous impact on the surrounding neighborhood. Will the future conditional use restrict the hours, lightings, and forbid visual and sound impacts? I think you've already talked to that. 5th of the 5, the supersized neighborhood station has the potential to impact quality of surface waters, groundwaters, aquifers, and wildlife habitat. Gasoline and diesel fuel spills will happen, and vehicles do leak fluids onto pavement. Method for cleaning up fuel spill include dispersal of a absorbent material and the subsequent collection and disposal. At an Irving oil station earlier this summer, I exited my vehicle and stepped on to a pile of such absorbent that had been placed on a spill and never cleaned up. With shoes contaminated, I moved to another pump. This type of spill and other vehicle fluids which collect on asphalt enter the stormwater collection 3 catchments from Horseshoe Pond Basin according to the 2020 Stormwater Master Plan. The potential impact should be considered by the planning board. A smaller station would have a smaller impact. The second major area is traffic. Please consider that the Irving driveway on Pennacook Street, as proposed, would be at the confluence of A, 2 westbound lanes plus a turning lane on Pennacook Street, which I believe you can see on the map. B, the driveway at 26 Pennacook Street, 2-family home with residents who must back out of the street to exit their property. C, the narrowing of the street from 2 turn lanes that come off North State Street intersection to westbound Pennacook Street. This occurs on the approach to the Bradley Street intersection, which is just to the top of that. The Irving patrons entering and exiting the site will be negotiating considerable conflict points with the traffic of A, B, and C. City comprehensive transportation policy provides direction, but seems to be ignored in whole or in part until the bicycle subcommittee brought up the points. People walking or rolling on assistive devices or people riding bicycles must be considered. These vulnerable users will be at risk in summer and winter to the elements as well as considerable vehicular traffic and extended crossings. The confluence to be a recipe for disaster and potential loss of life. One of the more troubling impacts of the confluence may be that 2 lanes of traffic on North State Street as they move on to Pennacook Street. They will be negotiating for 1 lane at Bradley Street. That intersection is important because it provides the neighborhood south, which would be to the left of that, of Pennacook Street, access to Kimball Park facilities as well as Boys and Girls Club. The potential for racing to be first to this single lane is troubling at best and potentially very dangerous for all people. My final area is to talk about housing. As my former neighbors at 24 Pennacook were moving out, I visited them. Although the interior of the house, built in 1930, could be refreshed, the structure appears solid. These neighbors had 2 daughters and recently invested tens of thousands of dollars to rebuild their garage and front porch. The investments are testament to their intention to stay in the neighborhood. The unfortunate confluence of the traffic engineer recommendations to the developer to move the driveway west has condemned this home to rubble and degrades the remaining neighborhood. In Concord, there has been a reduction in the housing stock available for single families, with pavement for vehicles superseding housing. The 2 properties purchased by this developer at more than twice the market value have moved 2 more single-family homes from the community and broken up the neighborhood. According to the Master Plan studies of 2000, this Northwest End district had the highest total population in the city. The loss of housing stock here should be considered. In summary, the Plan Board is tasked with implementing the master plan for the city as it reviews proposals. Neighbors have had little opportunity to influence this development and will suffer the greatest impact. I have talked with many residents in the surrounding neighborhoods who have little knowledge of the extent of this super station being proposed. Many more will learn the impacts to their lives if the board approves the proposal, and both houses and the buffering forest are destroyed. The neighborhood desires a gas station to return to this corner, and I concur. Nonetheless, supersizing the station is a flawed solution that imposes considerable negative impacts. The confluence of driveways as described above is likely more dangerous than the alternative entrance closer to the intersection. A smaller foot station with access for people walking from the sidewalk on the front building with the preservation of more of the existing buffer would be a more reasonable alternative. There seemed to have been little compromise by the applicant to limit the size of the development. Every accommodation, including as many turning lanes, impervious coverage, breaching of buffers, and building location, have been granted by the city. Given the variances that allow fuel sales in the transitional zone, the building could be repositioned next corner to be consistent with the master plan and zone ordinance. The master plan can protect the neighborhood if you will consider a reasonable alternative. If you do not, no one else will. Thank you for your consideration. Please protect this neighborhood.
Thank you for your testimony.
And I have copies of the testimony.
Please,
if you would
be
like
great.
that.
That'd be great. Thank you. Questions? Anybody? No? Thank you for your testimony. Got one more. Did you sign in, Mr. Baker? Thank you. Hi.
Hi, good evening. I'm Meredith Hatfield. I live at 5 Perkins Street. To get to Perkins Street, you would continue up Pennacook, take a left on Bradley, and then park to your first right. It's a nice little 1-block street that I close to this area. I agree with what's been said, so I'll try not to be too repetitive, but there are a few things that I wanted to cover. One is the lack of notice to the neighborhood. I'm not familiar with what your legal requirements are for notice. But for those of us who are very close, and the people that I've talked to in my street, nobody knows about them. And I think they really would like a chance to weigh in. The traffic comments that have been made, I agree completely. And I think it's really a miracle that there hasn't been a major accident at the intersection of Pennacook and Bradley, which, as the prior speaker noted, is the access to the Boys and Girls Club and also the access to the city park. I think at a minimum, if this goes forward, the developer should be required to significantly improve that crosswalk. It's faint on the street right now, and there's a lack of stripe as well. And there possibly should be one of those, I don't know what it's called, but those things that kind of sits in the middle of the side crosswalk so that when you're trying to cross.
It's called a Weeble.
Weeble, okay, thank you.
Just for the record, I didn't know that either, but that's
Several
what
of those,
that's what the Weeble.
Several of those in that area could be helpful. The noise impact, I think, could be considerable, and that's been raised already, but I did want to echo that. When the Irving was there previously, I could hear the dumpster being emptied at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, so I would respectfully request that you put very strict time limits on when they could do things like the fuel delivery, but also trash removal and things like that. And please, please, please do not let them TVs on the pumps, because I will basically be sitting at the deck listening to 10 TVs at gas pumps if you allow those. The landscaping buffers, as the prior speaker spoke about, are extremely important in the rendering. I do want to say thank you to Irving for grass and not bright orange mulch. If you can possibly require them to have natural looking, a natural buffer that looks natural, that isn't bright orange, that would be really nice as well. I do agree with the comment about the trees. If you drive around and look at other gas stations, a lot of the trees don't thrive on those properties, and we will be looking for that to be a buffer. If we could put in the place where they will be the most successful, that would be appreciated. In terms of the constraints, those have all been created by Irving. So, it's a huge site once you tear down 2 homes. And so all constraints on the site in terms of size and placing because of the size of the building. It really does feel really out of character, that area, and I would suggest, hope that you would send them back to the drawing board to say, please come up with something that's smaller, less than 10 pumps, and a smaller store. A question that I have, I'm not familiar with your specific setback requirements, but I believe you have one related to the back of a building. But a question is, what is the back? Because of the sort of funky, triangular nature of the lot, I'm sure what they consider the back, but if you look at the build, it's really close to both areas of the butt. So I'm not sure how they're meeting the setback requirements or if those are being waived as well. I would respectfully request that the planning board not act on the night. I would really like a chance to talk about this with people in my neighborhood who, as I haven't spoken to anyone who knew that this was happening. Also, the applicant provided brand new information today that none of us have had a chance to look at, so I don't really think it's fair for you to approve it, even with all kinds of conditions. I really think we should have a chance to review everything completely, to have our questions answered before you take action. And there are some things that I'd like to talk to Irving about, like the TVs on the pumps. Also, would they be able to put in no idling signs? What other improvements are they willing to consider at the intersection of Pennacook and North State? Because on the other side of Pennacook Street going toward downtown, there's an old median strip that is in pretty rough shape. And also those crossing lights seem like they're very, very old, and they don't work very well sometimes. So when I try to walk to Horseshoe Pond or bike down there, sometimes it takes a really long time to cross. And it's just not a human-friendly area. A whole set of questions that would to impacts to the neighborhood are what happens during construction and how can we work with the city to ensure that there isn't an appropriate cut through traffic. It's a problem we've in Perkins Street with Bishop Brady students trying to get down the stop signs on Pennacook where they go down our street, which is kind of almost a one-way, but not really. So we'd really like to be in the loop with the city and with Irving during construction to make sure that as people are trying to avoid the area, that they do so in a way that's safe for the residents. I think that's all I have, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, any questions? No? Thank you for your testimony. If you could sign in before you leave. Next, come on up. Don't we all? Hi.
Hi.
You could state your name for the record?
My name is Jackie Teague. I live at 28th Street, which is another block over from Perkins, your previous buyer. And so I'm in the neighborhood all the time. I'm often crossing Pennacook Street to get from my house to the bank, past the club, so that's nice. But my biggest question is about traffic flow estimate. It's a fairly busy intersection now, but I never spend a great deal of time going, so I don't know what the per hour count is. I'm sure I misunderstood the thing about 100 cars an hour, because if it was only going to be open from 7 in the morning till 11 at night, which is a 16-hour day, that's only 6 per hour. That doesn't make sense to me. That's not a profit-making thing. But as soon as the Langley Parkway opens, I only heard about Langley Parkway a few years ago, even though I've lived at Highland Street for 33 years. I only heard about Langley Parkway recently. And so when I looked it up on Google Maps, that giant unpopulated forest area has tremendous appeal, taking the pressure off all of the sides where people coming south on 93 or west on 4 are now going around Friendly, up Franklin Street, and through all those residential neighborhoods to the hospital and the other businesses over there. So when the Langley Parkway comes, and I can't see how it's not coming, I think it must come as Concord grows. So sooner or later it's coming, which I think must be the profit motive for Irving to enlarge the size of the gas station. I misunderstood about the 100 miles per hour or whatever. When the Langley opens, the traffic count is going to quadruple or more. It's going to be astronomical. So I don't know what I misunderstood testimony
We'll get some
people.
clarification for that.
How many cars they think, and talking about 15 years out, I mean, 2035 is very far out from now and stuff, and so it's interesting to me that there isn't a now, or at least when the little convenience store is open, or even though the convenience store is gone, what's the count now? But the point about the winter and the snow and the snacks was cosmically important, but then what's the 5-year estimate and the 10-year estimate and the 5-year estimate and the post-Langley Parkway count? Because I do think that the traffic going through those 6 or 8 houses is going to be astronomical. And I know that's all going through the wealthy part of town now. And so this is going to really impact these 6 or 8 people. I guess somebody's going to make a value judgment that 6 or 8 people, as opposed to all those residential streets going up the hill towards the hospital, is a better way to do it. But I'm just interested in the traffic count and whether really you've made that turning of that corner smooth enough, and whether you're imagining all the people coming bypass and having to turn right at the state employee thing and then going up and then turning up Pennacook is going to be, you don't have enough lining between Binney and Santander Bank and this intersection for all those who will be coming off 93 and the bypass, then get onto the beautiful Langley Parkway. So that's my concern.
Great. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? No? Thank you. If you could just sign in over here, it'd be great.
Over there? Okay, sure.
Who's next? Can you just push the sign over sheet over to the other table there? Thanks, Brian. Could you state your name for the record?
My name is Pat Wallace, and I live at Horseshoe Pond, which makes me only somewhat a member of this project, though I do my bicycle through that intersection fairly frequently. I tell you, it's already a problem and will become more of one. But my primary concern has to do with collapse of neighborhood. It seems to me that you have a responsibility to our community at large, and our community at large has a need for moderate income housing. It seems each time a proposal comes through that requires a larger parking lot or more space, you're willing to sacrifice residential homes. In the case, we'll lose 2 immediately, but I'm quite convinced that that's the beginning of the lapse of this neighborhood. The driveway coming out of this property as proposed will enter right across the street from the neighbors who spoke earlier. Those properties are going to be devalued unquestionably because of that increase of traffic, the lights going into their homes. These people are going to want to move out of there. They aren't going to have the protection, the economic protection that the people got who were in the houses that were directly in the way. They paid out handsomely. People whose properties are simply impacted negatively by this project will have no protection from it. And the day will come when they say, all right, somebody who wants to use this property for a development and is willing to pay me handsomely for it will get those properties, and we'll see the gradual decline of what is now a very pleasant human neighborhood. There will also be a problem with cars coming out of this driveway who want eventually to head out north on State Street. They will do so by turning right. Will either go in through the entrance that goes into the club and then work their way out through the parking lot by the bank and onto North State Street just by coming out the driveway by the bank. Or they will go up to Rumford, where they also come out to an unlighted intersection, which will allow them to make a left turn, a reasonably likely left turn, onto North Street to head out on their commute, which is what this is ultimately all about. So my primary concern is the enormity of this project. I've looked at lots of renditions of projects, and I like to, my eyes know how to accommodate for the difference in scale. You would certainly think it would be possible here when there are cars. But I went to the site today and I walked around and I was stunned by the size of this project. It is huge. I know they have a right to put another gas station in there. I have no objection to another gas station going. The neighborhood obviously accommodated the one that was there before, and it worked well enough. But this is an enormous project, and I think it would really serve the community well if you took a look at it before you proceed giving it the necessary stamps of approval. I guess that's my primary concern. This is so huge. It is enormous. If they were to put in 3 islands with 6 pumps, it could be done, and we could save these 2 houses. They could always put them back market, and they couldn't recoup what they paid for, but they could sell them. We would gain those 2 residential units that are now going away, and we wouldn't lose the ones across the street, which will almost inevitably succumb to this creeping development. So that's what I have to say about this. I hope this isn't a fait accompli. I kind of get that feeling sitting around here thinking of all the variances they've gotten, all the support they've gotten from the planning boards and the community, but I don't think it's looking at the community as a healthy whole when we say this is okay. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you for your testimony, Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Walsh, would you believe that I share your concern about the collapse of neighborhoods and sprawl? And would you believe that North Main Street from 393 South to Center Street was lined by beautiful stately homes?
I would indeed believe it, and so I hope we can prevent these more modest homes from becoming a thing of the past as well.
Thank you, testimony.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sign in. Anybody else? He's coming. He's coming.
He's worth waiting for.
To the table. If you could state your names for the record.
Certainly, the record. I'm Mary Stewart Guile, and I live at 35 Penn Street in Concord.
Bob Guile, and I all live at 35 Pennacook Street in Concord. And we have for over 40 years.
Welcome.
And everything that we had planned to say has already been said, except we have been there. As a matter of fact, my husband will attest to the fact that when we were in the throes of purchasing our home in 1974, people were telling us at that time, don't buy your home, we're going to build the Northwest Bypass. And
in 1974?
It goes back beyond that. It goes back further than that. I think it'll be 100 years before the Northwest Bypass, which now changed its name. It's a much lovelier name, but there will be a lot of concerns. I just want to reiterate our concern about the sale of the model that has been presented, the impact that that will have on the neighborhood. As I said, we've lived there a long time. We know the traffic counts. I mean, between 7 in the morning and 8:30, it is very hard to go west on Pennacook. The traffic is ongoing. And certainly between 3 and 5, I know you heard counts, between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, the traffic is continuous, coming from Bishop Brady and Lincoln Financial. And then, of course, there is additional traffic in the evening. I haven't got any counts, but my house faces the street, and I'm very aware of the traffic going down. So I am concerned about the size. The other thing that I haven't seen in the project is there's an advance of property between the proposed model and Rite Aid. Was that ever considered as a direction for expansion? Because it's just
CVS?
an empty lot.
Is it CVS or Rite Aid?
Rite Aid, yeah.
On North Main, on North State Street.
I believe that's where the building is standing.
I'm sorry?
That's where the building is going to stand.
Yeah.
So they are using.
I believe so. They could speak to, no,
Yeah.
it's not. I thought it was.
It goes right up to the property line.
Goes right up to the property line, yeah.
And then I share the concerns that have already expressed about the traffic patterns with people coming up Pennacook Street and trying to, for example, go north and cutting through the Rite Aid, going up until to Rumford Street and heading north there. There are, it is very confusing, and it is a neighborhood. There are children who go to the Boys and Girls Club, or families that go to the park in the summertime. So I think that whole area of volume of traffic and its impact on the pedestrian population is something that you should consider. And lastly, I'd just like to tell you that Pennacook Street is a very historic street in Concord. The house that we live in was built in 1854. And the man who built it, his son, if you ever go and look at the back of the State House, that's where this young man is now. He's preserved as a statue. So the neighborhood is adjacent to the historic section of Concord. And I really would like you to take that into consideration as you deliberate this project. What can you do to preserve the neighborhood, and what can you do to honor the historical past of the street?
So you don't have an objection to having a gas station there, just a smaller gas station?
A smaller version. I would, when we had the smaller version, and that's another thing, and I can't remember ever standing in line, number one, to buy something from the convenience store, or ever having to be behind another car in order to access the pump. So being an educator, my question always to people in my field, where's your assessment? And now you heard some of that, but in terms of the volume of users, I don't call it being a bother.
If you feel that they will come, I mean, that's the that's the other of the coin. Is
that
if you
is
build
true.
5 pumps and a station,
that's a worry.
They'll come.
That's a worry to have, so that. So I thank you for listening, and my husband, I know, has a
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the traffic situation. I find myself very often going north on Bradley Street toward Pennacook Street and turning left on Pennacook Street to get to my home. Bradley section of Bradley Street houses the old KFC hall, which used extensively for various gatherings. When the exercise classes are being held there, there are cars parked on both sides of the road.
Can I just stop you for a second?
Sure.
So you're coming on, so if I went up Pennacook Street, the Boys Club is on the right-hand side and Bradley Street, you're on the left-hand side of
That's
Bradley
correct.
Street. So you'd be coming towards Pennacook Street to take the left. And what number are you, 30?
35.
35. So you're on the
Big
left-hand
white
side,
house.
up on the big house, set back from the road. So you're coming along, you're heading north on Bradley before, okay, sorry.
Yeah, and then turning west on
Okay.
Pennacook. Bradley is, at various times, is extremely restricted in terms of the ability to get through cars parked both sides. In the wintertime, this is really extremely hazardous. So my concern, I guess, is that I don't know whether or not the exit from the Irving station proposed on Pennacook Street permits a left turn. I don't know if the median is going to come that far up. After hour, I would be extremely hesitant to endeavor to make a left turn
I don't think
coming
that-
out of that driveway.
I think you're going to be able to turn left on Pennacook Street, right out of that, yeah, so coming out of the top entrance, so you can't turn left out of the estate, but you'll be able to come out onto Pennacook Street, turn left, go to the lights, and then go left to go North State.
Yeah, all I am saying is that at rush hour, coming out of Irving and endeavoring to make a left turn
Yeah, getting across
is something I might do with considerable trepidation.
Okay.
I've also noticed that the traffic on Bradley Street coming south past the Boys and Girls Club has increased substantially over the last year and a half. So as Mr. Baker observed previously, you have a confluence there of traffic, which seems to me to be increasing. And with difficulty in making a left-hand turn, people, I think, are naturally going to endeavor to make a right-hand turn and to try and figure out how to get from there to their destination. As I have observed, I do not think that Bradley Street headed south is appropriate given the narrowness of the street at various times when events are taking place in what to be the old KFC Hall. Similarly, turning right and going through Rite Aid is not a solution. So my concern is basically the traffic one.
Okay.
As with my wife, I'm perfectly happy to see a smaller station there, a replica of what previously existed. But I think that anything of the magnitude that is currently being posed is going to raise all sorts of problems, as have been pointed out by the previous speakers. And as I say, I think it will create, as far as traffic is concerned, what we used to refer to in the Navy as a fur ball. Thank you.
Taking questions? Thank you for your testimony. If you could sign a sheet there, that would be great.
Thank you.
Who's next? Last chance. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Get to use my old gavel, how about that? Yes, oh, absolutely, no, we don't want to close the public, no, we want to leave the public hearing open, so ignore that, and we will address the comments, yes. Sorry about that. Do that.
So fast.
Too quick, it was just too fast.
Thought you could get away with that.
I never did. Never did.
For the record, my name's Maria Dolder. I'm attorney for Irving Oil.
Great, welcome to the table. Come up.
Here, I'll sign that after they're
Okay.
finished, but I'm going to try and address all of the.
Good luck.
Yeah, I've kept good notes, but I'm going
Okay.
to try and chunk them together as much as I can because I don't want to keep
Okay,
repeating.
great.
So, and you can ask me questions any. In terms of notice requirements, as this board knows, we're only required to notice direct abutters project. And other than Mrs. Snow who testified here tonight on behalf of herself and her family, none of the other parties that testimony are abutters to the project. they all live in various neighborhoods around this or in the Concord area. That's why they wouldn't have received notice, because they're not abutters. And I would also just like to point, we also didn't hear anything from our direct abutter who purchased Mr. Baker's house opposing the project, and they would obviously be impacted by this. So I just would like to point out for the record that although Mr. Baker used to own the property, he does, he did sell that back in 2015.
If you could just pull that mic a little bit closer to you, that would be great. He'll adjust it.
Moved it away,
I know,
so.
he'll adjust it, that's fine.
All right. In terms of the gasoline use, clearly the gasoline use in the commercial district already exists on the property, and so that use is not going to change. That was already there. We are asking for a CUP because it's permitted by CUP, under your planning board regulations. The gasoline use within the other district where the 2 resident houses were was already approved by the zoning board. So we received a variance for that use and now are allowed to use that property for that particular use. Which leads me into much testimony that you've heard here tonight actually relates to the variances that were granted by the zoning. The zoning board went through all 5 parts of our variances, and they determined, and they did listen to abutters, they did listen to the public that came, but after the testimony and our presentation, they did determine that we met all of the prongs of the variances, and therefore they granted all variances that we requested. Those variances were not appealed, and so therefore, to make the argument now about what happened at zoning, it's inconsequential. It's not up to this board to decide whether or not zoning made a good decision. We're allowed to go forward on all of those variances. In terms of the retail use and its size, I just want to reiterate that retail use is permitted by right on that site. That is a commercial property. We kept the building entirely located on the commercial portion of the property. So that's a use permitted by right under the zoning ordinance. We did not need any relief for that particular building. And the concept has been approved by ADR. We did get their permission on the style of the building. We've obviously worked with them to try and keep it in conformance with the neighborhood. In terms of, there was some question about like setbacks, and we meet all the setbacks. So that building does come as close to the Rite Aid property. And I don't know if there's some confusion, but the property to us is owned by Rite Aid. They use it as parking area. There's nothing that we have access to there. But we meet all those setbacks.
So I think there was some question because there was an empty pad, there was some space there. So this design goes right to the property line.
Yeah, well, outside the setback.
Yeah,
but yes,
yeah.
as close to our property line as we possibly could it, without obviously encroaching the setbacks.
Okay.
There was some discussion about buffer requirements. So we did need a variance for one particular requirement. It's kind of an awkward requirement. The zoning ordinance has, and it has to do with the driveway up on Pennacook Street. So technically under the zoning ordinance, you have a frontage buffer requirement when you have a residential zone district in the middle of the street, which is unfortunately what happens to us. And under that zoning ordinance, it would require a buffer strip to entail our entire frontage and not allow a driveway. We were granted that variance so that we could get the driveway, but that's the only variance that we needed for buffer requirements. We meet the other buffer requirement or the zoning ordinance and under your planning requirements. And so we meet the landscaping. We're going to have buffers between the residential use and this property, and we meet all of those requirements. So there isn't any question about whether or not we're satisfying that. We didn't ask for relief on that. I know there was some talk about the fence. We're going to not only have the fence, but we're also putting up vegetation. I know we've worked with Heather and the rest of planning into what that vegetation will look like. And so, you know, we're meeting that and satisfying that. There's been some discussion about Langley project and how that impact the site. And I mean, quite frankly, that's a little bit of our control. The main reason why Irving went and purchased those 2 residential properties was because of the Langley project. It was because Langley project is proposing a strip on Pennacook Street. And And if that project were to go forward, is Ted Irving's regular site, all access to Pennacook Street would be cut off to the site. And they'd be with the entrance on North State Street just for circulation, and all of those reasons just wouldn't work. So why this took so long is that Irving got in touch with engineering and started to discuss the possibility of a driveway on Pennacook Street. And so this was a location that was agreed upon. You know, the Langley project will stop the median strip prior to that driveway to allow left turns out. And quite frankly, we pushed the driveways as far from the intersection as possible. I know there was a comment saying, why couldn't we just leave the driveways? Quite frankly, the city doesn't want that. The city would prefer all of the driveways be pushed as far away from the intersection as possible, and that's what this design has done for us. So we've tried to take all of that into consideration designing it, and quite frankly, that prompted the purchase of the residential houses, was to access on Pennacook Street. I think there was testimony about the bike lane, and I just want to reiterate the bike lanes being maintained. That shouldn't be an issue on North State Street. There was testimony at the zoning board, and you heard it here today, that and one of the things that the zoning board considered was that there's already been existing commercial creeping into this neighborhood. You've several times referenced to the Boys and Girls Club and the various exercises classes, the insurance company on the street, the church, Bishop E. And so the neighborhood, obviously, I've read fire station, it has already been impacted, and so clearly the zoning board did not feel that this was bigger encroachment and granted variances. The items that were new today are design items. They've been negotiated with engineering, so they really have to do with the median strip that the city's requesting that we construct. So I think Frank and Heather have explained it very well, but on North State Street, it was our proposal to put a median strip in now. I mean, we were just designing around the future Langley project. The city requested that we do that, and we're willing to do that, but it's taken a lot of engineering maneuvering, just given the site. And so those are really the comments that have been relayed today, because we've been working very closely with staff and to get all of that resolved. In terms of the general site layout and what you see here, been the site layout since we started the process. I suppose, and so unless you guys have questions for me, I mean, in terms of traffic issues, clearly I'll defer to Heather. She's been working with city, and I know that city's looked at the numbers, traffic, and they've approved it, so.
Suzanne?
The people who testified tonight did not say they didn't want a gas station. They had problems with the other gas station.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, but this is, the retail store is permitted by right on the site. Yeah.
They had a retail store. Yep. That's a given. The other areas that you mentioned, the Boys and Girls Club,
yep.
The Columbus, those are more institutional. They're not commercial.
There's an insurance company up there.
But they're a totally different scale. And I guess when the zoning board, my impression, the zoning board should never have granted variance based on a plan, because that plan can go away. So I think our job as a planning board is actually interpret the impact of that kind of development. I happen to be on the planning board when the CVS wanted to build, and it was like too much development for the site. I look at this and I see a lot of asphalt. And I totally sympathize with the neighbors because they had no problem with the gas station. But this, at the scale, is larger. There's an Irving station near the high school, a very busy intersection, and it's very difficult to come in and out of that. But I think that you can have a total of 8 cars at a time.
Yes.
And how many would be here at a time if every single
10.
And it's not as big as this. This is a much bigger store. There's a total of 10
There's 5 pumps, 5 pumps with pumps on either side. So you can put
Yeah,
10.
it's only 5 pumps on this site. It has 5 pumps.
5 pumps, yeah. So yes, it would be 10 fueling
10,
stations,
okay.
yeah. You're referring to the other station on Pleasant Street?
Yeah.
Yes, so we are actually looking at redeveloping that, and we would be building a slightly larger building, which would be similar scale to this. I mean, that's another matter, but the stores we are building now are actually quite a bit larger than this one. Our minimum is typically 3,600, but in consideration of the size of the lot, we have downscaled to 3,100, and on some sites we are building 6, 7, 8 pump. So this is a lot. We've designed it in consideration of the size of the lot.
This is 3,100?
It's 3,250.
280.
Okay. Let me ask you a couple of questions that I heard. Hours of operation for this?
So that would be decided by the operator, which we don't have yet.
Okay.
This is not a highway site, so it is possible that it would be, maybe 6 to 11 or something in that nature, but until operator, I couldn't say for sure.
Okay, so trash removal and things like that are all going to come at that point.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly accept a condition of limiting trash and delivery and fuel delivery within, say, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. We've done that at sites in consideration of neighbors, and also to the TVs.
TVs and the loudspeakers, that was my one. Yeah.
So we don't currently use that technology. We may in the future, but again, we could accept a condition of not having that at the site. But it's not something that we would install today anyway, but we could accept that condition.
Okay. Probably not for you, but snow storage. What's the snow storage as far as the considerations for plowing the site, and where's snow going? Towards the street or towards the back?
I mean, there's a couple areas. There's a strip on this side of the site. There's an area here. But in reality, any excess snow is going to have to be removed from the site. This is typical with any gas station.
Okay. Landscape plans, lighting plans, when do those kick in?
Yeah, the landscaping's all been designed. I mean, touch on this. There was some discussion about street trees and whether they go on the grass strip or not. Regardless of where the sidewalk is on Pennacook, there are street trees proposed along Pennacook. And there's also an understory proposed of a shrub hedge that was a result of our ZBA meetings. We did speak with the neighbors across the street, and we made an attempt to plant a shrub row between the trees along Cook to help shield lighting and so forth. We have made an attempt to address concerns. The fence that's proposed along the southerly property line here, westerly line, is 8 feet high. It's higher than the normal 6-foot fence. So we're trying to address some of those concerns. We tried to retain as many of these large trees as we could. Added some supplemental planting in there. I know there's a recommendation from staff to try to retain those trees, and if anything does die, it needs to be replaced and supplemented in that area, so they address that as well. We also have trees proposed down along North State Street in this vicinity here, and we have a arborvitae behind the building here. So we are proposing street trees on the project. They're just not in the grass strip, but behind the sidewalk. So it has the same effect. So I'm not sure if that clarifies anything there.
Okay. And then Suzanne hit the trees one more time, but I wanted to ask, sensitive to the fact that the exit onto Pennock Street is going to have headlights just right into the house across the street, and I can't think of a way to mitigate that. That's something I'm going to say we need to change. There's no way to do that, but I'm sensitive to light as well. So cut off lights, and I mean this is all going to be up to par with what we want to see for lighting package as far as the full cutoff and the.
Yeah, we actually met a lighting plan with the project. We have LED lighting. It's all full cutoff, dark sky compliant lighting.
Okay.
All directed downward. We're sensitive to the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We're not trying to, not be neighbors. There's a lot of testimony about the size of development, and we understand it's larger than what was there. but there's economics to these projects, there's substantial investment to build this, to make road improvements, and there has to be a rate of return on the project. This is a custom store. This is the smallest store that they've built as a new store. This isn't the shelf by any means. So, as Jen mentioned, typically we're doing 4,400 square foot stores. So this is smaller. The dispensers, yes, there's 5. If you reduce the number of dispensers, you create potential other issues by supply and demand issue. People are going to come here to get gas. If there's inadequate pumps, you're going to have stacked and backing up at the pumps and congestion on sites. We try to accommodate the anticipated volume of gasoline sales here, and we choose to install the number of dispensers based on the anticipated volume. So it's not simply reduce the number of dispensers, because that has other ramifications. In terms of the pavement and circulation for these types of systems, there's standards we designed to in terms of clearances between the curbs to promote safe circulation. Certainly the old site did not work in terms of that gas layout. There was no pass lanes between the pumps and the stores. It was inefficient. Here we have more than adequate circulation around the canopy. We have to provide safe circulation for the fuel tank to make deliveries. Area to back up out of the parking space so they don't interfere with people at the pumps. Minimum design standards we follow for this type of design.
Yes, Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. First, I want to say I found it a little tenuous to use the existence of Lincoln Financial as a justification for this kind of development. I've been there for 27 years, and it took me about seconds to figure out what you were talking about when you said an insurance company. I mean, that's 100 yards off of the road that it's on, in the back of an office park, and that entrance is 150 yards away from this.
Yeah, and it was raised by our abutters at the zoning board. They read that as being creeping into their neighborhood. So I only am reiterating what our abutters had testified to the ZBA, was that it had already started to creep, and they used that as an example.
Well, that's been there for more than
30 years.
More than that, because I've been 27 years, and it's been there for 10 years since before that. Okay. On the other hand, here is my question about reorienting the entrance of the building to face North Street, as was suggested.
So we do have a pedestrian entrance off North State Street that will be a functional pedestrian entrance, and it will also have like a roof and a storefront facade. So I guess just with the geometry of the site, I guess it just works better to have it oriented that way, but the side facing North Street will look like a storefront. It'll have a nice little sign over the door. It'll be proper.
But most of the light, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but most of the light for that entrance is going to be shining towards residential areas, what I'm thinking of.
What orientation?
And the traffic.
He's talking about if you could move the building this way, and I think you'd.
We do look at several different layouts with Heather. We looked at the building up in the corner here. We looked at the building back, and we looked at the building here. We looked at several different layouts with staff, and based on the constraints of the driveways and the site circulation and the desire to have the building on the street was the best alternative for all those constraints. There was a discussion about the building in this corner of the site and have the rear of the building facing the intersection. And with this type of use, you have a lot of coolers in the back of the building. You can't have windows. You can't have pedestrians coming in through areas. I mean, it's very unusual to have 2 doors to a convenience for safety reasons. We typically not have 2 customer access points, but in this instance, people desire to have the streetscape. Irving's agreed to two entrances, one facing the intersection. So.
Yeah, and the cashiers need visibility to the pumps as well. So the cash register would be in the front, so they need to have that visual access to the pumps as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Please, I know you talked to has anybody talked to the Boys and Girls Club?
We have not, no.
Because I have made concerns with the way this traffic flow is, and I well understand that when the people come out and you've got traffic coming from your old employer at Lincoln and you've got traffic from Bishop Brady, you are going to go left and you go through Bradley. I mean, I have to tell you, I have done it. You go in front of the Boys and Girls Club and through Rite Aid. I think that's a major consideration, and I'd certainly like to have you all, before I vote yes on it, I'd certainly like for you to talk to Boys and Girls Club, see what concerns there are there, and also we haven't heard anything, I'm assuming you've not talked to Rite Aid either.
Well, Rite Aid received notice on the butters. They have not expressed any concerns.
But I'd like to make sure that somebody's talked to them about the traffic flow as well, because I certainly know if you go to the Boys and Girls Club and you decide to go out that way instead of coming back to Pentecost Street, there's a big sign that says you can't, you're not supposed to cut Rite Aid. And I can't remember who's on the other side of Rite Aid.
There's not a cut through.
Merrimack County Savings. But anyway.
There's not a cut through in Rite Aid.
No, there's not.
Right, okay.
No, that's my point.
Yeah, because originally with planning, actually planning had originally asked us to look at whether or not we could get it through with Rite Aid, and they refused. So.
Refused. Yeah. No, there's not a cut through.
Yeah, no, they got notice of the project, and they have not contacted us.
I really would like somebody to take into consideration, talk to Boys and Girls Club and take into consideration the traffic pattern there, because I do think it, for me, knowing that area, I think is a bit of a concern.
Yeah, once again, I'll defer to Heather to talk about how you do your traffic. I'm not going to pretend to know, but I'm assuming you took into consideration the neighborhood.
Correct. We did perform a full traffic impact and access study, and said earlier was reviewed with no comments on that particular information, or actually about the whole study, really in general, about the traffic flow and whatnot. We assume 15% of our traffic would come to and from Pennacook Street from the west, 50% to and from the south on North State Street, and 35% to and from the north. Equals on. So that's what the trip estimate said. That's what's been approved by the city traffic engineer. So we of course we're sending traffic down Pennacook Street, and we expect that. But that's what the estimates. The majority of the traffic is on North Street, and that's where we expect to pull it from. So we have no left and no right. So they have to come in onto Pennacook Street and then make their left back out onto Pennacook Street. And during peak periods, it may be difficult to get out, but there's plenty of queuing room on site to accommodate those queues.
And I think that's my concern, that at peak, if you're adding 100 cars per hour, as I understood you to say, at peak times, and those are the peak times of the Boys and Girls Club for kids going and being dropped off, or in the afternoon. And if you can't, because traffic coming from Lincoln or Bishop Brady, if you can't turn left onto Pennacook Street, you're going to go right. And then your natural instinct's probably going to go right on Bradley, which is right there at the Boys and Girls Club. And then where do you exit back onto North State Street? I would just really like it if you all would, one, speak to the Boys and Girls Club, or somebody. Has the city talked to the Boys and Girls Club? I think somebody ought to talk to the Boys and Girls Club, bottom line.
I guess just for the record, since they're not a butter,
I understand the record.
There's
I understand that.
There's no legal requirement.
I well understand that.
Quite frankly, I don't even know what I would discuss with them. I mean, I don't know what I would be asking them.
Well, maybe the city should talk to him, because I do think that, to me, is an important entity with kids. And I know I don't live right there, so I don't know whether the kids are dropped off by bus, by foot, bike, by car, or what, but I just think somebody at least should alert the Boys and Girls Club and see if they have any issues with it. And I'll understand you legally, you've done absolutely everything, Buck. I have no concern with what you all have done legally and what your rights
Yeah,
are.
and again, my just big concern about it being pushed to us to contact them is that kind of goes beyond the scope of what.
Do that? May I
think you just did.
City, guess what?
You can direct, you can make that recommendation.
I would just, to state for the record, I would like somebody, or I will vote yes on this to make sure the Boys and Girls Club of Concord has been considered. We will know if they have any concerns. A few more things, but that's number one. So.
What else?
No, that's okay. That's number one. No, that's good.
Okay. Other comments, concerns, questions? Carol?
I'm really disappointed that we're here, particularly because it seems like it's been the city that has created what I consider to be a lot of the problems with this plan. We've had in the past a practice, a recommendation that driveways come out opposite one another. The current situation has the back exit from the Santander property pretty much opposite the current or previous exit from this property. Now, as has already been pointed out, the exit from this, the lights go directly into the property of the street. We have dealt with that issue in other parts of the city, and it's not good. We haven't really talked about light impacts at 26 Pennacook Street. There will be this fence and a buffer. It would be nice, I think, to have the shrub buffer along there, as they've talked about on Pennacook Street. So there's 2 levels of vegetation, providing buffer there. To Suzanne's point, there's a major loss of green space in this hood being replaced by impervious surface, which it's not good. And I mean, I've been sitting here trying to think, are there other services within Concord that have 5 pumps?
Probably on the heights.
I mean, the scale of this, as many other people have said, it troubles me as well.
Frank? I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I guess in terms of scale, a scale like this seems appropriate to me in a rural area where there aren't many other options, and to have something of this scale where there are other opportunities to buy gas, to buy urban gas within a few miles, just rubs me the wrong way.
Okay.
And there is a change of use from 2 residential properties to gas. I know the zoning board has approved it, but that doesn't take away the fact that it is a change of use. I'll stop.
Okay. Frank? Pull up a little. Just pull up.
Pull.
Where Steve yells at.
I agree with both Teresa and part of this in my mind reminds me of a sense of shoehorning, that all this is being fit into this space which is expanded in order to allow this new station to be shoehorned in. And I'm troubled because I'm reminded of a project a number of years ago on Loudon Road Side Drive, where we put 3 pharmacies on 3 of the 4 corners. Yeah. And when I go now pass over East Side Drive at peak hours, realize there are places I just can't get into because the traffic's backed up. And I see some of this happening here. I understand Irving has a business plan. I am disturbed by the notion We are looking at sites around the city, and we want to get bigger and more football. That's fine. That is business. But I am troubled by how the site is being configured in order to further that business plan. And that troubles me.
And it's on, I mean,
I mean, what I've heard tonight is, I'm not sure there is another way to configure this site, which was the question raised earlier. Where else can you put a building of this size and the added number of pumps and still accomplish what you want to accomplish on a very, very busy intersection? And I think Teresa's point is directly in point. The traffic is going to increase. It's not decreasing. And we are now putting in a more, in my mind, a more intense use, which is going to tax the existing traffic situation. And we're not really even factoring in the neighboring business that, one way or another, come on or depart from Pennacook Street. And that's not a complaint, that's just simply a fact of life.
I guess to that, just to that comment, I guess I would like to at least throw out there that the original design that Irving came to staff with was not this. The original design was with a building in the back, sort of obeying the residential property and the gas tanks up front. It was planning that asked us to redo it. They did not like the building configured in the back. They wanted the building as close to the street as possible. So quite frankly, we flipped the site per the request of planning.
Ask you just what their reasoning, do you remember that?
You can ask Heather, but I can tell you what she explained to us was the master plan was to make this area more pedestrian-like. And in order to do that, you needed to have builds on the streetscape. And so it was requested by us that we try to get that building to North State Street, have an entrance off of that, and allow for pedestrian access.
But that had an impact on the size. I mean, the size was already set, right?
Yeah, I think the size of the building was the same on the other.
Siding.
It's just in terms of design, though. This design ultimately, that's how we got here.
I mean, I think what frustrates me is that, you know, I share a lot of Frank's frustrations and Carol's frustrations, particularly since this is my neighborhood, you know. I mean, when you folks finish with this, you go home to your houses, you're not going to be living right next to a thing like this, and the people in the audience, and I am. And I used to use your urbanization. You know, my 29-year-old daughter asked me as she left this morning, I left the house this evening, she said, why do I need another gas station this close? And I understand, as Frank does, the business needs, you know, and the business demands and your business model. But it's frustrating to me, as the official, that, you know, if I take what you say at face value, that this configuration was driven by apparently our parking staff, or rather our traffic staff, you know, in order to accommodate the possible future construction of a project that's been out there for 40 years.
Yeah, and I mean, quickly, it was. Irving originally looked at redeveloping just the site that they owned, and when they came across the Langley project and realized all of their access on Pennacook Street would be continued. So that's what ensued from, they bought 2 additional properties in order to obtain the access. So unfortunately, I understand everybody's concern and I understand the scale, but at the same time, they went out, they incurred costs of buying 2 additional properties, and in the scope of working with the city, they now are rebuilding sidewalks, they're putting a median strip in North State Street, they're maintaining the bike path, putting sidewalks on their own property. It's really grown in scope, and to justify all of those additional costs that the city is asking us to do, I mean, Irving is willing to do it, but certainly it has to be at least economical. And as you heard, this is the smallest type of store that they do. So we have tried to tailor it to the area and take those considerations in. But with all the extensive requests of the city, I mean, it's unreasonable for them to try to do it any other way.
Let's hang on just a second. Just want to get staff comments.
I have many comments. Okay. I think there's a lot of things that haven't been responded to. There's a lot of clearing the record that needs to happen. I would appreciate to hear more from the board. I think, I don't know if Matt hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, okay. Carol, I saw Carol's hands first, so sorry.
Well, I guess I'd like to return to the pedestrian access question, because in my mind, pedestrian access is more likely to come from the neighborhood than from North State. So I'm a little confused about that. So.
Okay, as opposed to coming down North State Street, you think it's down Pennacook Street?
Well, yes. Where are the houses where you might, where are the people that would run in for
or pedestrian on bikes, which
or
North
whatever.
State. Okay. Okay, Matt?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, a little differently maybe. First is, if Irving was not initially going to expand the site to include 2 homes, why, if it's true that the city traffic engineer had an interest in helping develop and enlarge this site, I have to ask the question, is this sort of the first development of the inevitable Langley Parkway? And are they asking to help construct this intersection and improve this intersection to facilitate the building of Langley? Is a much bigger deal for the residents of Pennacook Street than this gas station.
Yeah.
Is Langley Parkway, because once, if that goes in the next 30 years, then this is going to be significant in the grand scheme of things for them. So maybe it's conspiratorial. I wonder why, if it's true the city is put this site in the way it's designing it, if this is the beginning construction of Langley Parkway.
David? No? Okay. All right, Heather.
I would like to go on the record. My concerns are more the configuration of Dayton and where they put their buildings and their awnings. You know, it doesn't work in my mind. The awning should be on North State Street and the building should be in the back.
Okay.
Because you just pointed out, foot traffic is going to come from Pennacook Street. And they have to walk across the entire plot to get a store.
Mm-hmm.
And that means walking through the awnings of the guests.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, Heather, you're up.
So as I said, I think there's a bunch of things that haven't been addressed. There are a lot of comments from the residents that haven't been addressed, and I think they should be addressed. For the record, I'm just going to say I don't know that we have time to get to everything tonight, and we still have more to go through on the agenda. Just going to say that right. When this project first came to us, there was not, it wasn't, as they mentioned, there was not those 2 additional residential properties in there. So the plan basically, they had the building in the back of the lot with the standard gas station, parking in front, pumps in the front. And I said, you need to bring the building up. We want it on the corner, because that's what urban development is, and that's what the master plan is for this street, is not for the pumps and parking on urban important corners that are going to be critical, especially when Langley Pike comes through. So maintaining that corner and putting the building in the corner is what we pushed for, what I pushed for, be hard. So they listened to that. There was also a concern about traffic. You know, they were told this or that particular thing is not going to work because of the traffic volumes. They were not told, go out more property and put your building in this.
So we already had purchased the property when we met you. This was our plan. It already included the additional property.
Okay.
So I'm just responding to your comment that you went out and purchased more property so you could put the access away from the intersection. And I'm telling them that that property wasn't part of the initial thing and that you weren't able to go out and purchase more property.
It was always part of our initial project. We never came to you until we had the property.
I guess
it was based on conversations they had with Rob before coming to us with that layout.
Right. So talking about the conversations that we had with Rob before you submitted that layout, in which they were basically, all I want you to know is that planning did not tell, hey, if you go out and buy more property or if you acquire property, we'll be okay with this layout. It was basically X is not going to work because it's too close to the intersection. So when they came back with their next plan, had 2 or 3 different layouts, none of them showing the on the corner because for whatever reason it wasn't a desired outcome for them. So of the plans that they showed us, you know, we said, all right, well, State Street is the primary street, so that is where the building should be. Penn is a secondary street, so if you're going to have, if they were willing to bring the building to State Street, because that was a primary concern to staff, that we maintain urban feel along State Street. So, you know, again, we were building on the corner to hold the corner because that's what urban design is, and that's what's consistent with our master plan. The scale, when we first had these conversations, I don't recall what the scale development was. I think that the community is making very good points. You know, typically when we have development that are going to affect a neighborhood or where there's a lot of public concern, we've told the developer to go and meet with the community and work out some issues and have a public meeting. That's not uncommon. We've had other developers that have had high impacts on neighborhoods do things like that. I'm disappointed not to hear you guys come and say, hey, let's with the community. A lot of what I've heard is just discounting everything that they've said. And I feel, you know, there's a lot of things that they brought up here that could be addressed and that there has been offer to address them.
Well,
so I feel
yeah,
like,
and I would be happy to listen to them. We just haven't heard any. I mean, they've talked general like traffic. I'm not sure what concerns you're thinking we're not addressing. We did meet with the butters to discuss it, so I'm not sure what concerns, and if you can lay some of them out for us, we'd be happy.
I have a pretty long list of them, but I don't know if that's a good use of our time right this moment. So I think the community does raise some good concerns, and I think it is the purview of the board to evaluate whether or not it's an appropriate development and whether the scale is appropriate for the community. I kind of bristling a little bit at the notion that planning somehow is advocating for or in you know, more in favor of this development. We have been providing feedback along the process. I think you all are doing exactly what your job is, which is to make determination on whether or not a project is appropriate for the community, whether it's consistent with the master plan, and whether the impacts are reasonable and desirable. The conditional use permit for this use that you have to grant. So it is not a foregone conclusion, and there are a number of issues to consider, and you should, you know, as a board, do what you feel is the right thing to do.
So let me ask this. So just, and again, I want information. I want as much information to make the most informed decision that we can have. Sure. And listening to the members of the board here, I don't think we have a favorable outcome in your favor on this. So, you know, if we looked at the board and said if we were to put this for a vote right now, it wouldn't be in your favor. So I'm going to say that I think a sort of a forum, some type of a public forum to be able to get impact from the neighbors, from the community at large, is probably something that I'm going to say we need to get some feedback. We need to, yes.
I want to add that there are a lot of questions about traffic, and some of those can be addressed. I think the issues around traffic, you know, frankly, we have a city engineer who he's stated what he feels will work from a traffic perspective. So from a technical perspective on traffic, I think it would be helpful for him maybe to attend a meeting that you're going to have to address the concerns that they have. I think that there's a difference between the requirements that we have for traffic. So there was a traffic stop, but somebody asked that question. There was a traffic stop. We have numbers they provided that we asked them to provide. But there's a difference in what Rob is looking at. He's evaluating the impact on infrastructure, intersections, and safety, which is different from how many cars are actually going to come to this site. Right. What's the impact on this site? That's not necessarily what we're looking at. Rob, you know, everything what the traffic engineer presented was very specifically, you know, indicating, looking at on the infrastructure and the intersection. So they're not talking necessarily about when Langley comes through, how many more cars are coming to your site versus when Langley comes through, can your site, the traffic from site and Langley, can the intersection still handle it? That's what's evaluated. There's a difference between those two things. So I think understanding what we have looked at and what has been determined will be helpful. I just wanted to add that in.
What's the requirement for noticing a public hearing like this with regard to regional impact, but expanding, broadening out a notification process to say any within a 500-yard something. I don't know what the number is, but I want to.
I think the community has defined itself by showing up here tonight and raising their
saying
concerns.
we're up to Perkins Street,
in the
we're
past,
over to this street.
In the past, we've just said go to the neighborhood, which is.
But again, is that the task of the client? I mean,
yes.
Is the applicant is responsible for?
Yes. Typically, it's not the city that goes out into abutters and other affected organizations. Typically, it's the applicant that goes and says, "Hey, we want to do this. What do you think?" That's it's an open.
We've seen it happen on Pleasant Street. We've seen it happen with the building up in Pennacook. We've seen it on a lot of the projects.
I would be making the point that you are not in a butter, and so let's discount what you say here.
But
I mean, if you put houses down, it's still going to affect your block.
But legality is they noticed people that needed to be noticed, and I appreciate that.
Maybe I just make a comment, and this is sort of the next point, and say that it is appropriate for the city traffic engineer to factor in the possibility of Langley Parkway, because it has been a city capital improvement project plan for decades, and in fact, there's money, I think, in this fiscal year's budget for the preliminary plan for Langley, which was part of the public debate, and made a motion that we push it back a year, and it was kept in. But it is appropriate for the traffic engineer, to take into account eventualities that are in the city planning process.
What is our purview on moving to the next step? What do we want to task again with as far as?
It's what you choose, board. What do you feel is?
I think it's to have a public hearing or to have some type of a roundtable discussion with the neighborhood. Say, this is what we're doing. Here's the latest plans. Here's the specific study that we've done. Here's the final plan we submitted today that you can take a look at. We just need to hear. Sure. I mean, again, I'm sensitive to the fact that it's affecting the neighborhood. It affects the fabric of the neighborhood. It affects the real feel of what that neighborhood is. To Matt's point, if Langley Parkway goes through, this is a significant piece of that puzzle because it changes dramatically. I can't look at that. I got to look at what's happening next year in 2020 and 19 and 20 and say, if we do this, this is what it's going to look like for the next 10 years until Langley Parkway goes through.
I think two things that's been brought up. One is scale and the size, and whether or not that's appropriate. I mean, numerous board members have brought that up. The community members have brought that up. That's a whole conversation. I don't know if you want to have it tonight. So one is whether or not how the board feels and have a conversation about that. That's a big issue. It's not going to necessarily be resolved by them with the community. And the other is if we do determine this is the appropriate scale and this is economically the only thing that they can do, what types of things can address some of the concerns that the community had. They talked about snow. Is there something we can do? No. They talked about loudness of speakers. So they're not going to have video cameras. Are they going to have? There's almost every gas station has those speakers now. I mean, a number of issues here that nobody has addressed. Community members have raised. There was concern that Bill's not an appropriate type of fence. Maybe we put a stop fence. There are a lot of minor issues that are going to impact that community that they can discuss after we determine what's the right.
I don't want to get into dictating what fence they use and how they use it. I think at a bigger level, my concerns regarding the site out, the scale of the site, and traffic, and that's really what I heard. I mean, I heard some other issues, but I heard issues loud and clear from the people that
would agree. And if the community came and said, you know what, we'd rather building we're back on the back property line. I mean, I'm just telling them from a planning perspective what we would recommend as best planning practices. I certainly wouldn't insist planning's perspective that the building be located at this frontage if everyone in that community wishes it was located on that frontage. I mean, that's not our interest.
I think that's you see that differentiating the board because the question was asked, why isn't it facing North State?
And is that
assuming that 10 years from now that Langley Park is still not built, but the building's going to be there for 40, 50 years and usable for that length. I'm at the point where I need to move on here, and I think we're at the point where there's not enough support here to move this project forward from where we sit. I think we like the project in concept. We need it. There's a need. There's a desire to have it. You heard it from the residents. I think we need to do something in the way of formally tabling this to get this off of the agenda for tonight. Request that you reach out to the neighbors and get feedback. And I know,
yeah, well, I guess my question.
I know that piece. I know that's a tough one.
No, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Quite frankly, we did reach out to our butters, and up until there was a gentleman that came to ADR last week, this is the first heard from the neighborhood. Nobody showed up for the zoning hearing.
So how about this?
So
how
how
about
do
we task neighbors? Robert Baker's very good at getting the word out. How can we task the neighbors with getting the word out?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Where do you want us to do this? How do you want our scope to be? Like, how do I know that I've done the way the board's asking me to do it?
Can I have a neighborhood volunteer to say you're gonna take the mantle?
Yeah, but I have to say, and I've done projects like this before, I have to say, you're asking us approval. It's your responsibility, even though legally, you need to go reach out.
Right, I just want to make sure we're reaching out to the people that you want us, that's all I mean.
With Meredith Hatfield volunteered, and I'm sure Meredith, is that what okay, Meredith, I used your name since I know you raised your hand. Meredith Hatfield volunteered to work with the neighborhood, and so I think you all need to work with Meredith, and get, if you need to include the city, but the responsibility, I believe, rest on you all as good corporate citizens, and which you are, and I think everybody on this board believes you're good corporate citizens, because most of us use your products, but as good corporate citizens, if you would reach out and say, all right, well, what is it? I mean, I look at this, yeah, do I have some concerns with the layout? I'm so sure I agree with where Heather was, but on the other hand, it makes sense. I don't know. But I think, and there are other things that have come up, like the lighting, like the noise, etc. Put a comprehensive proposal together that we can say, right, this is it, and that the neighborhood can say, okay, we welcome you back into the neighborhood, and that's where I really think it needs to go. I think it hasn't really gotten off to the wrong foot, but it's not comprehensive, and I'd like to
let you talk,
request
because I know you've been ready to talk, so please.
No, I would say, thank you everyone for your comments, and we will certainly take this away, another look at the layout, and set up some sort of public consultation forum, and we'll certainly
Can maybe you connect with the representative on the neighborhood piece to make sure that they can get to you, email you, and communicate with you directly. So what we're going to do, would the right solution be to table this?
Just continue it.
So continue it, so we can continue it to next, hit it on the agenda for the front part of the month. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carol.
I'd just like to say, presumably you sat here through the previous presentation and saw that they came to us with several alternatives and talked through the alternatives. It would be really helpful, I think, to us and to the neighborhood if you could also provide an alternative with the building further back in the site so it was more accessible to pedestrians from the neighborhood as an alternative. And presumably that'd be easier because you've already been there.
Yeah, we can certainly look at alternatives, and we'll bring back anything viable that we can add.
And we're not anti-project. I mean, everybody agrees that it's a needed project. We want it to go forward. We just need to figure out the right balance between your project and the neighborhood project.
Sure, no, understood.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Ms. Hatfield to include the Boys and Girls Club in?
Please, yeah.
Thank you.
Please do. Okay, so we need a motion to continue. Someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
To continue. Motion's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. The application's been continued. We will not have to renotice for next month. It's been continued, so the onus will be on the neighborhood group to get together with guys and again, we don't expect a solution to come out of it, but we want them to be heard. We want you guys to hear what we're saying, and then come back as next month, and we'll address it again quickly next month.
Thank you for all your
Quick as
time.
we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We got a couple of quick items left in it. And just a special a shout out to the neighbors. Thank you neighbors for coming, and thank you for your testimony tonight. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's move on to item 8C on our agenda, which is Rhymes Oil, a major site plan determination of completeness motion of waiver. We got here for 8C. Could we read that into the motion?
SFC NG Partnership on behalf of Rhymes Propane and Oil requesting major site plan approval for construction of a new parking lot at 257 Sheep Davis Road, Gateway Performance District. Staff recommended this item, or this was determined complete at public.
It was not.
Oh, I'm
They've
sorry.
requested a waiver. Sorry, they've requested a waiver to have the public hearing the site as determination of completeness. This is a major site plan. They were before us 2 years ago. We've already looked at this site. It's just expansion. So we support doing the waiver and having the public hearing set for tonight.
Okay, so the determination of completeness component, do we need to vote on the waiver to determine the application complete and open the public hearing? Somebody like to make that? So moved, and motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. The hearing is open. Welcome to the
you need two motions. Can we go in one?
Second motion is?
You have to do the waiver first and
the waiver.
And then make the motion to determine the action complete.
We just did the waiver. Now we need to make a motion to determination of this. So motion's been made, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You're the lucky guy up on the next item for the agenda. Congratulations.
Thank you. Dan Flores with SFC Engineering, representing Rhymes Propane and Oil. As stated, they are looking to do some additional parking on their site. Show that in the darker gray area here. We did receive both planning and hearing comments, and this plan reflects our way of addressing that. So we already had proposed 29 additional parking spaces. There are 70 parking spaces now. So the total would have been 98. We lose one because we're converting 3 regular spaces into 80 accessible, so one of the spaces becomes a van aisle.
Didn't we I'm sorry to interrupt, didn't we address this in the original application? We addressed this parking, didn't we? And didn't need it, and they didn't need to do it, right? Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. This is Rhymes' corporate headquarters. They handle customer service, billing, truck batching, some staff training on occasion. And the owner is looking to keep some of the parking in the front near the building for customers coming in. That's one of his reasons. No expansion of the building, he's just finding a need for more parking than anticipated prior. So one of the comments we received had to do with landscaping. We had posted 3 trees. We've now increased that to a total of 11 trees around the parking area. Likewise, request to our interior landscape area. We previously showed small islands that did not meet the definition, so we have removed 2 spaces along this area and now have our 1, 2, and 3 interior landscape area, which exceeds the 5% minimum required. That's pretty much...
Pretty straightforward? Yeah. Okay. Questions from the board?
So you haven't seen this plan yet?
He mentioned at ADR last that these are the changes they were making to address our concern about the
But they're not in our packet.
They're not in your packet. No, this is...
So you haven't really reviewed them yet? Because I guess my concern is always that the trees are near the asphalt.
Yeah. So they are along the parking, and then...
And they can be in the interior as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And the planting details don't reflect our planting details.
I think that was that a comment?
But that's, I mean, I can't look at it because it's not, but
okay.
I trust you to...
I did review them, so
Huh?
I think they're okay.
No, I can't see it.
Oh, okay.
No, I know. No, but the planting detail was incorrect in this backpack.
It was the prior version.
Oh, okay.
It was the 3 version. We get the 3.
But I don't, that planting plan is not.
No, this is the first time we've seen it.
Right.
Yes.
if I could clarify real quick, this was just a presentation to show that we can address the comments that we received, and this is how we would address them if you were tonight.
It's just hard to see it when we have it in the packet. That's
Okay, other comments? Board, any comments from staff?
No.
Any member of the audience wish to address this application? You've left. Okay, so what have we got here? No issue staff other than what was brought up here, the trees, the interior landscape, you've addressed that with the design. So if we approve it, we're going to approve it based on the redesign, the plans. We need to get those to staff and as submitted. So not our plan that we're looking at. So in our packet here, we've got 4.2, which is to waiver
ADR.
4.1 ADR, sorry, 4.1 to grant ADR approval of proposed site plan for a parking lot expansion submitted. Somebody like to make a motion to grant ADR
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion, 4.2 is to grant the waiver as outlined to sections 1203.1 and 1503 to not have a licensed land surveyor prepare, sign up, and update existing plans using criteria, blah, 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 blah. I don't need to read all that, sorry. So 4.2 is to grant the waiver. Somebody like to make a motion to grant the waiver as outlined?
Move to grant the waiver as outlined.
Second.
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 4.3 is to grant major site plan approval for the proposed parking lot expansion at 257 Sheep Davis Road, subject to the precedent and subsequent conditions noted below. Outline precedent conditions 1 through 4, subsequent conditions 1 through 4 as well. Someone like to make a motion to grant that major site plan approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You're all set?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry for the wait. Okay, brings us to 8D.
TF Bernier Incorporated, on behalf of Harold E. Judith Ekstrom, requesting comprehensive development plan approval, minor subdivision approval for the lot consolidation and lot line adjustment between properties at 5664 Warren Street, 3236 North Spring Street, 1791 and 21 Green Street in the Civic Performance and downtown residential districts.
Great. Welcome, table. If you guys could state your names for the record.
I'm Tim Bernier, TF Bernier Incorporated.
Harold Ekstrom.
Welcome. Let's get a quick staff summary, if we could, on this project.
Sure. So tonight we're just talking about the adjustment and lot consolidation, and this will make possible the major site plan that you determined complete earlier today. It's quite complicated. It took me a while to figure out what was going on, but I think the only waiver requested was regarding pervious surface calculations, and that will be addressed as part of the major site plan application, so we do support that. There's also the component of comprehensive development plan, which, because this is a performance district, is something that's required in the zoning, and a lot of those requirements are met as part of the major site plan application.
So those will be addressed even if we grant the waivers.
Right.
Okay.
I have a colored up. Can I?
Surely.
Makes
Yeah.
that. Just put it.
So this is an exciting looking project. This a long time coming, Mr. Ekstrom?
It's been about 40 years coming.
Oh, there's that.
We'll show it.
Uh-oh. Technical difficulty.
I might have to unplug the mouse and use that port. That seemed to stop working last time.
Same thing happened to me the other day, and it was like 30 seconds before the USB showed up.
Doesn't
What
like
is going on here, huh?
the best way to look at it. We can look at the plans. It's a lot of legal stuff going on, but pretty much what we're doing is get the first sheet of the set is the existing additions. Okay.
First sheet of,
First sheet of the
plans,
set. Yeah.
plan set, okay.
Is the existing additions plans. 12 lots involved in that we're adjusting lot lines and eliminating lots. So we have 12 lots that we're beginning to work with. 2 of them are currently vacant. 64 Warren Street had a residential structure on it, but was raised in 2016 for disrepair. Those 12 lots are going to be consolidated, reconfigured into 5 lots, so going from 12 to 5. Ultimately, in part of the next project, and part of this is all kind of tied together. You can't really do one without the other. There's 6 more structures which are going to be raised. And then if you look at the last plan in the plan set, it'll show ultimately what the lot will look like when we get doing all these lot lines around. Sure. Yeah, that one shows at the very last one. This one shows what the lots look like, but still shows the building. So the next one actually shows the it's called the east plan, but shows the large lot in the middle that's going to ultimately be the development and the final lot lines. So all of the lots are going from 12 to 5. So all of the lots, with the exception of 21 Green Street, are getting bigger and be more conforming because we're merging so many lots together. 21 Green Street is getting smaller because the bulk of the parking lot out behind Greenwood Avenue is part of lot 20.
Which one's 21?
21 Green Street does this have a pointer? I can point to. 21 Green Street is this building right here.
Okay.
There should be there somewhere.
Okay. No, that's good. Thank you. That's Sacco's office. Yes. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's, so it's getting reconfigured, but that building is staying. That's a building on Green Street. This is the new housing, community housing building. It's located at
Community Development Authority.
Community Development, yep. This is a commercial building on Green Street that's staying, and this is a commercial building on Green Street staying. But these 3 buildings the lots are being reconfigured. All 3 of them, these 2 are getting, this one is getting smaller because essentially right now the line just goes all the way across, and this area belongs to 21. So we're taking that off, but it still conforms with zoning for lot frontage, all of those things. Spring Street, there's an existing driveway. If you look at the existing additions plan, there's an existing driveway that comes into the parking lot that's in this area through here. And this was a separate lot of record, so there was 2 lots here. Originally, lots 32, 34, and 36 North Spring Street. We're going to merge those together and convert that driveway to an easement over that, than having a driveway on a lot that's completely by itself. This easement here that we come in is currently Greenwood Avenue, which is a city-maintained private street that's going to be the city's no longer going to have to maintain it. It's going to become private. But this building still uses it for access. We'll use it for access. There's a driveway located right here for the building, and there's a parking here that will use it for access, and there's a parking lot out back that will use this common access way. This part of the project is just moving lot lines around for what's the bigger project that we're going to hear next. The only way to request everything is complies with zoning. There isn't any zoning relief that we needed for this. The only waiver request is tabulation of impervious surface, which doesn't make a lot of sense at this stage because we're not changing impervious surface. We're actually reducing the number of lots. So we're just moving political reason around. We're not tearing anything down, I guess you could say, or we're tearing stuff down, but it gets muddled with the next project. Of course, if the project doesn't get approved, we're probably not going to move forward with it because there wouldn't be a point anymore. So it's just kind of step one of a bigger project that we're going to talk about next week. That is part of the comprehensive development plan. The city has an ordinance where if you start moving a lot of lines around without doing anything, you need a comprehensive plan to give some idea of what you can do with it. I think you guys have access to all those plans. You saw them earlier this evening of what the bigger plan is, and it kind of meets all those criteria. The project as a whole is compliant with zoning and the master plan, and we think it's a really good project. It's Harold's lifetime dream to do this, so we've been working with Harold on this for 2 years, so we're looking to.
And you heard the prior discussion about getting neighborhood feedback and making sure that you're. So just so you know, just want to put that out there in advance because you're right near a school. There's a lot of things to consider. This is fairly straightforward. There's not anything on our end. It's not straightforward. It's very complicated, but I want to reiterate nothing. If we do this, nothing changed in the sense that houses aren't going to start getting ripped down tomorrow and the plan comes back, and if the plan doesn't go forward, then the lot lines don't get adjusted. Okay. Frank?
I obviously something, because I don't know what the big plan is. I don't know what's going to get torn down. I'm just kind of curious as to what's going to move around once lot lines are in fact adjusted.
So I think six houses raised in total?
Yeah.
Yep, part of your package,
Yeah.
it was under the determination of completeness.
Under item 5A.
Right.
You can look at the plan.
That's the big plan on Warren Street. But it's
item 5A.
It'll be addressed in next month. I mean, we'll go into that big one. Wow, that and the Irving Station. Everybody going to be here next month, right? Yes. Bye.
A quick question. Do we know how many houses are being displaced by the project?
There's one rooming house that's there, and there are 5 other buildings. Of the 5 buildings, one is completely commercial, which is the pregnancy center. The other one is actually has an office in 1 bedroom. So there's actually, for residential units, there's 9 residential units.
Right.
And most of them are single men.
Do you know whether any of them have required assistance by city welfare? Or do you know whether any of them have required assistance by city agencies?
Of the rooming house, which is 12 units, all have gone except for the manager is the last one.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Tim?
If there's any more, I did find the drawings. That's the existing addition. You can see, I can't seem to get it rotated, but this is 21 Green Street. This is Green Street. You got Warren Street up here. These are all of the buildings that are involved. The 3 on Green Street are going to remain. The one on North Spring Street is to remain. All of the ones on that you see here that front on Warren Street alone are going to be raised. So these buildings, this building was already raised in 2016, as well as the garage out back. So that's already in the lot. But the rest of these buildings will be raised. These buildings, there are some here that these 3 buildings front on Greenwood Avenue, the private street, and these 3 buildings front on Warren Street.
And then I'm sure ADR and we will have a lot to say regarding the look of the neighborhood changing dramatically. So that's obviously an old neighborhood. So we'll have our chance. But
Along Green Street, the whole facade of the street, as
Doesn't
far as the
change.
building, doesn't change at all.
change, right? It's just the Warren Street
The
side.
only change that is on Warren Street, and that adds into the parking lot.
Great. Okay, so we've got before us the lot line adjustment tonight to address, and the report from staff lines.
Comprehensive development plan first.
Comprehensive development plan. No. What?
3.1.
Oh, on the report. Oh, sorry, I wasn't there yet. Yeah, so on the comprehensive development plan approval, what are we approving as far as the grant comprehensive development plan for the lot consolidation, just the lot consolidation, right? And then the waivers?
Right, you're not approving the site plan by doing that.
Okay. So under the recommendations here, we've got to grant comprehensive plan approval for the lot consolidation and land adjustments at 56 to 64 Warren Street, 32 to 36 North Spring Street, 15 Green Street, and 17 to 19 Green Street, as well as 21 Street. So we will, someone would like to make a motion to grant that comprehensive development plan as outlined so eloquently. We'll take that motion.
Move approval.
Somebody like to make a motion's been made and second in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 3.2 is to grant the waiver to require, again, no comments from staff regarding these waiver considerations because it'll be wrapped up in the big, if the big plan goes through. So 3.2 is to grant the waiver request section 120323 subdivision regulations and to grant so just under that, just that one waiver that's under 3. Someone would like to make a motion to grant that waiver?
So made. So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And 3.2 is to grant minor subdivision approval for the lot line consolidation and the lot adjustment at 5064 Warren Street, as again outlined earlier, with the following precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year: address technical review comments, address engineering division comments, partnership shall be corrected and identified identical prior to consolidating lots, and any waivers granted be noted and fully described in the plan. Okay, would someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval for the link consolidation?
Yeah, second page too.
Whoops. And then 5 is prior to the final plat being signed. Planning board must sign. Applicant shall submit 2 checks for recording the plat, and the applicant shall. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to read. Want to make sure we got them all. So 3.2 with the conditions 1 through 7 as outlined in your packet. Would someone like to motion to grant that minor subdivision approval?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. So we'll see you next month for the plan and go from there.
All right.
Great. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
I think everything else has been delayed, right?
Everything else is continued, correct?
Continued to next month. So 88F, 8G have been continued.
We still have the design guidelines public hearing.
We have a design public hearing, yes. So we do have to address this design guidelines public hearing because, oh yes. Hi.
To find out when we would be able to get input on this latest master plan.
I think are you referring to the code next character analysis for the code update?
No, for the master plan for the Green Street.
Oh, for this project that was just here, it'll be next month. So next month's planning board meeting, it'll be on the agenda, and we'll be hearing public hearing and public testimony at that point.
Now, would I be able to get a copy of the master plan? Or be
It's on. The master plan is available on the website. The plan for this specific project will be available on the website, and it will be updated in the agenda once the agenda is posted. So on the planning agendas for next month, they posted the Friday before. The updated plan will be on there at that point. But it's also the plan as it sits today is on the agenda in item, what is it, 5A. 5A.
Well, I did find it online, but I didn't see the picture, the big picture.
Okay. You have to click on the links.
They should be there.
Okay.
So
Buy it on that agenda, and if not, it'll be there the month before. Yes, go ahead.
when you look at the item on the agenda, you should see 3 attachments that say report, plan, and supplemental. And if you click on those links, you can see staff's report and the comments we've made on the project. You can see all of the plans that have been submitted, and you can see any other information that they've provided. To click on the links for the project, and it's available on the current agenda that's up right now.
On the one that says plans, and it is there. The pictures and the drawings of the front of the side of the building is all there.
Great.
Yep. I'll go look at that. Look forward to seeing you next month for some testimony. Okay.
You found it interesting tonight.
Sorry,
you get the blue ribbon for longevity or staying power.
Get you nothing, but you.
Were you going to talk about
No. That was just a lot line adjustment.
You guys have a tough job.
No, thank you. Good night. Okay, so we need to address the main guide. I know we've looked at it. We've got a final draft before us tonight, and this is going to be going before the city council. So it's important that if there are, no?
No, so just quick update. So staff drafted amendments out of the process, which did go before and were adopted.
Okay.
This is a planning board document, so council doesn't need to adopt it because it's basically like the master plan. It is a planning board document. So I waited to bring it back to planning board until to make sure to find council's feeling about the ordinance and how to adopt those amendments. I went back and I amended this design guidelines to be consistent with what was adopted. So some minor things some language has been changed to say, such and such shall be or is required or of that nature, so that basically some of the should were taken out to reflect the ordinance that was adopted. I also changed a few photographs because I got a lot of feedback on some odd things. So on page 5, I went out and took photographs of planters in the correct location in front of Gibson's bookstore.
They were just there for a couple days.
I
Did
you
have to move them? Yeah, no, they moved them again. Put mums and moved
I've been working out, so I was able to get them, to muscle them in the right spot. So after having the ordinance adopted and having made all those changes, I'm now bringing it back to you asking.
So this is a final,
this is it.
This is it. This is the one that we adopted. It's here. I think it's an excellent guiding document that Heather and the team created with everybody's input. So thank you. It's been a long process.
I would just suggest one change. I think we should take fenestration out of guideline 14.1.
Fenestration.
We're too funny.
Jeez.
Ouch.
Details.
Ouch.
Reading, don't you?
Fenestration, materials and design impact. Never.
It's a derivative of my name. Come on.
Fenestration.
Yeah, frame window maker.
That's right.
So is there a process to get this into the vernacular? Are we gonna
Make a motion to adopt.
So if we'd like to make a motion to move adoption of it as submitted, which has been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
May I compliment this?
Yes, it's an outstanding job.
We will look at those compliments.
The master plan is next, so we'll start on that. So we got a little bit more to do, guys, before we leave. So hang on one
So
second.
the next item that on the agenda was review of the character analysis. I'm going to suggest skip that till next month because of the late hour. I would love if you guys would maybe you already have, but look at it. And we went over how it works last month. I got an updated version, which should be on the website now, which incorporated some graphics, that analysis that were removed in this version that's in this link. So there's even more updated version than the one that's in your link. But please add it. I really want to get your feedback. I want to talk to you about it. There's a public meeting I'm having. It's next Tuesday in Council Chambers. It starts at 6 p.m. And it's to review this document. On posters up of pages of the document. I'll be inviting people to come up and look at the posters to talk about what they say and what the recommendations are. Been trying to get word out, and I will send you all an email inviting you. So next Tuesday, Council Chambers, 6 p.m. I wasn't anticipating it going much longer than 7. I'm only give like a 15 or 20-minute presentation, and then ask people to give feedback and walk around, and staff will be there to answer questions. So not going to go over that. The very last thing is that we have some legal lectures. Lisa, do you have the...
I just passed them out.
Excellent. So there are some...
Good ones.
There are some workshops coming up that NHMA is putting on, and we wanted to share that with you. We do have funds for things like going to workshops like this. We're looking into having, and we still want to have NHMA come and do a workshop with the planning board, but we're going to wait until we have a new member appointed to have that. So in the meantime, there's other fun stuff for brushing up or...
So if you want to attend, just let me know which one, and I will register you. That way I can do one check.
Perfect.
Yeah, did you have a question?
So the one on October 20th, do,
You pick your location, you pick your date, you pick your topics.
Well, the Act 20th is
no.
the one that's all three. It's an
All
all-day-long
three.
thing. Correct.
so do you go for the whole thing, or do you know what time, what's going to be, or
Well,
does that work?
You might want to go on the website and see if they have an agenda for that day.
Okay.
It's all three I'll put into one day.
Correct. So obviously, we would prefer you only want to go to one, that you only have to pay for one.
Right.
And that you just pick that one.
But you have a dairy or stratum to do it.
I know, it's a challenge. And also, that one's on Saturday, whereas the other are days. So, but you can go online, and we won't ask if you stayed all day. We won't check the sign, we won't check the sign-in sheet.
Okay. Any other items which should legally become before the board? Anybody else item? David Fox, would you make a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Motion's been made by Matt. Would it be made by David?
I will second it.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded to
The
adjourn.
agreement, Matt.
All those in favor? Aye. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Like George Costanza, the agreement with the squirrels.